Hey all, welcome to the Redzone Rodeo. I am your co-host Carson, and I'm here with Rob today, and we will be bringing you another episode, talking about all of the crazy news that's been happening this past week, especially with the NFL in regards to free agency, trades, stuff leading up to the draft. Gonna be crazy. Crazy stuff's happened. More crazy stuff I think is going to transpire. But we're going to be kind of trying to break down some of that, give you our thoughts and takes on some of these bigger moves that have happened. And yeah, let's get right into it. So we're going to be launching into our segment called the Redzone Rodeo Gridiron Go Around. And today, we're going to be bringing you a lot more topics in regards to the NFL, just because there's a lot that's been happening with free agency this past week. And we want to cover some of it with you guys. We want to talk about it. We want to hear what you think and whatnot. And so we're going to jump right in and start talking football. So with no further ado, the first question and the first kind of topic we're going to cover is no NFC division in the NFL will have a repeat winner this year.
Yeah, Carson, I think that take is a buckle winner, and there's a few reasons I think that. First, I think you have to look at the NFC South. I do not think the Buccaneers will be repeat winners of that division. The Atlanta Falcons went out and made, I think, the biggest move of all of NFL free agency and landed quarterback Kirk Cousins on a 4-year, $180 million deal. Kirk is 35, coming off an ACL tear. There are some red flags there, but he still played incredibly well last season when he was still healthy and in the game. And I think he'll come back and play really well for the Falcons this year. The Falcons have a ton of weapons. They have Drake London, they have Kyle Pitts, they have Bijan Robinson that went out and got Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore. Their defense is at least average, I think. Their offensive line isn't bad, and they still have a top 10 pick in this year's draft. So you add a franchise quarterback to a team that has a solid foundation like that, plus a top 10 pick. I think you're looking at a team that can contend not just for the NFC South, but for the NFC in totality. NFC East, my Cowboys did not do very great in free agency. They really didn't add a lot of people. They lost a lot of people, but we'll talk about that more later on. So I don't know if they'll necessarily be repeat winners of the division this year. The Eagles, they had oh God, this hurts me so much to say this, but they had a great free agency. They added Saquon Barkley. They added what's the name, Bryce Huff, the brilliant edge rusher from the Jets, who had one of the highest pass rush win rates of anyone last season. They had just had a great overall free agency period. I'm hoping, Saquon Barkley will end up not working out for them because he's like, a running back that's been in the league for a few years, and maybe they paid him too much. But outside of that, they had a great, great free agency. The Giants had a Brian Burns, the elite pass rusher from the Carolina Panthers, in a trade. And the Commanders spent more money than anyone and added a bunch of new pieces. So it's hard to know how that team will look. Safe to say, I wouldn't be surprised if the Cowboys did not, reprise their role as NFC Division champions, NFC East champions. As sad as it makes me to say that, NFC North, I think you might be looking at one of the better divisions in all of football. The Vikings, I feel like, reloaded their roster. They got two great edge rushers, two great wide receivers, two great offensive tackles. They're just really good at a lot of positions that are important. The Bears are going to be getting Caleb Williams. The Packers have their great young squad. The Lions, as good as they are, they have a lot of competition coming into this year. I think it's going to be a much tougher division this coming year than it was last year. And then you look at the NFC West. I think the Rams are a sneaky good team. I think they have made some great moves this offseason. They've really bulked up their offensive line. They have Matt Stafford. They have Cooper Kupp. They have Puka Nacua. They have Kobe Turner on the defensive side of the ball. They have a great coach in Sean McVay. I think the Rams could definitely challenge the 49ers in the NFC West and win that division this year. So while there's no guarantee, obviously, I think the idea of every single NFC division having a new winner this year is absolutely a buckle winner.
Yeah, I think you have more confidence than I, Rob, in some of these other teams that are in these divisions. I will agree with you. I do think that, in the NFC South there will be a run for the money for the Buccaneers. I know that, they re-signed uh um Chris Evans and or Mike Evans, I'm sorry, and Baker Mayfield. And that being the case, they're kind of bringing back those core elements that really led this Buccaneers team into the playoffs, and of course, being a very dysfunctional Eagles team. Um, could be interesting to see, but the acquisition of Kirk Cousins, and not only him, but also sprucing up things with Darnell Mooney and with Drake London and Kyle Pitts and some of these other guys that are on Bijan Robinson, some of these other guys, this Falcons team is going to be cooking. And I think that that's one of the things that, you know, is why they traded for Kirk Cousins, is why they went out and got their guy. Because if you really actually think about the process for the Falcons, the missing piece for them has really been that quarterback. Whether it was Desmond Ritter last season or Taylor Heineke, they weren't really great options, and there really wasn't great options around them that they could trade for, or they could have even drafted better. If you really look at some of the predicaments that they were in, and so realistically, the Falcons are building, they have a really great roster. And now bringing Kirk Cousins in, someone who may not be the best quarterback, but is clearly a presence for, you know, a bit more stability when it comes to someone playing quarterback for the Falcons, and with the weapons that he has around him, I think this Falcons team can go far. And so I agree with you. I think that the Falcons can, upset the Bucks as the division winners last year, and they could easily take it. I also agree with you with the NFC East. I don't know how strong the Cowboys are going to be. I know they retained a lot of their players, and so that means that their team is going to probably be similar to what we saw last year. But as you mentioned, the Eagles really popped off in free agency. They signed a bunch of players. I think in a way the Eagles are trying to crush doubts with their team, and with what happened last season. I think they're trying to go out and they're gonna be like, you know what? We're gonna show people that we are still real. We are the real deal. And so I think the Eagles are going to be coming back super hard to retake that division. Falcons, or not Falcons, I'm sorry, Commanders and the Giants. I'm just not big on what they've even been able to do this offseason for them to contend for the division. But I think that the San Francisco 49ers are still going to be a top team. I know the Rams, have been building this kind of secret weapon behind the scenes. And the 49ers have certainly lost a couple people in free agency. But I think that the Shanahan process could still be dynamic moving forward, and knocking them off is going to be tough. So and getting even into the NFC North, that division is the most shakiest, I think, in terms of who's going to be taking the crown. Um, I feel that the Lions have missed the window for Super Bowl, hopes. I feel that they had the best likelihood of success last year, and unfortunately they couldn't get it done. And I think that the Packers and the Bears are really building rosters that easily can challenge the Lions. So absolutely. But I think going so far to say that no NFC division will have a repeat winner this year, I feel like there will be at least one. And if I could say one, it's probably going to be the 49ers. So I do think this is a bucked off take. I think that to say that all four divisions are going to be different teams, different winners, despite all the things happening with free agency, with some of these teams shaking things up, I still do think that there will be a couple of those dominant teams, whether that is the 49ers. I can even see the Cowboys running it back with the people that they have. So, and who knows, maybe Dan Campbell can rally those boys up in Detroit again. And maybe Green Bay and Chicago can't put the pieces together this year. So we'll have to see. But yeah, I think that this is there would have to be too many things that would go right for all of these teams to upset all of the previous winners for this to be a buckle winner take.
Yeah, See, I think of all the teams most likely to repeat as a division winner, for me, it's the Detroit Lions in the NFC North
Really?
because I feel like they've really improved their defense, which was their weak spot. And this is prior to the draft. So I only expect them to add even more talent to their defense in the draft. And that was only like their big weakness last year. But we'll talk about the NFC North more here in a little bit. I think the 49ers are vulnerable in ways that, maybe you didn't realize when you were saying that the Rams don't have a chance of knocking them off, or as much of a chance as knocking them off. You look at their defensive line; they lost two-fourths of their starting pass rushers uh, and defensive linemen. They lost Arik Armstead. He went, I forget where did he go to Jacksonville? I think
Yeah, he
right.
went to Jacksonville. Yep.
They lost
Big
Chase
news with
Young
them.
too, who I know just signed with the New Orleans Saints. I know he didn't have a great year last year, but who do they have now at defense? Do they have Javon Kinlaw left, right? So
Yeah, they have. Yeah,
who do they have now at defensive tackle to play next to Javon Hargrave? I don't know. Who do they
that's
have?
true. Yeah, I don't know.
Their defensive line is looking kind of compromised. Their secondary last year was shaky a lot of the time outside of Javarius Ward and that one safety they have who got hurt early on in the year. What's his name? Tala. I don't even know how to say his name, but you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, they're shaky in the secondary. They're shaky on their defensive line now. Their offensive line, certainly outside of Trent Williams, it never was even that great last year. They gave up a lot of pressure. Um, Obviously, having Kyle Shanahan as your offensive coordinator kind of masks that deficiency. But their roster is still very good. It's just not as good as it was last year.
Yeah.
They might not have what's his name, Dre Greenlaw, because of injury. Uh,
Yep. It's true.
so it seems like their team is just kind of starting to fall apart. And then I said this way back when we talked about the 49ers possibly not reaching, the Super Bowl again. Like their Super Bowl window might be over. And I think this is a huge part of it. Their roster is pretty old in general. And it's starting. Trent Williams is in his 30s. Christian McCaffrey is almost 30. Uh, Outside of Brandon Ayuk, Debo, and Brock Purdy, all of their star players are getting up there. And maybe
Hmm.
Nick, I think he's only 25. So they're going to have like a complete reset of their roster. And I think that process is going to start this year. I still think they'll make the playoffs. But when I look at the NFC West and I see the Rams with Matt Stafford and two great wide receivers and a great offensive line and a great running back, really all I think the Rams are missing is like a dynamic pass rusher to pair with Kobe Turner, their interior defensive lineman. And I think that would make them because position for position, Matt Stafford to me is a better quarterback than Brock Purdy is. Sean McVay is probably about on the same level as Kyle Shanahan in terms of coaching. I think the Rams and Niners kind of have like a wash at wide receiver. I think their two wide receivers on both teams are very talented. It's just I think when you look at the quarterback position and the Rams have a better guy there and the Niners are kind of falling apart. That's why I think the Rams should be favored over the 49ers to win the NFC West this year.
Yeah, no, I mean that's certainly fair. I just the 49ers offense, it was working so well this past season. And of course, we did also mention, Christian McCaffrey is getting up there in age, but there's very few running backs that can do what Christian McCaffrey can do, even despite his age and what he's been able to accomplish each season. And I know like the 49ers have definitely lost people on the defensive side, and their defense is not going to be as strong and as dominant as it had been last season, just with, players going elsewhere. But I still do think that the Niners offense will be dominant. And as long as, Brock Purdy has the weapons around him, I think he will also not only just excel, but I think he'll also grow as a quarterback because he is still a younger guy. And so with that being the case, you have those options. I think that, with the Rams even too, the Rams have a really good offense as well. I think that the NFC West could really be like a shootout and whose offense can be better, and who can score more points, who can make that one defensive stop that could change the game. Um, and nothing against the Rams. I mean, absolutely anything can happen. The Rams could come out and just absolutely stomp the 49ers as well. But just, from them to go from Super Bowl level play, offensively speaking, still feel like that winning kind of culture in San Francisco, the how the offense clicked, I think that's still going to be present and it's going to be tough to stop. just as it was last season. So absolutely, the Rams could unseat the Niners as the division winner. Um, but I still think the 49ers should be viewed as a scary team to play, despite the losses they've had on defense. Because how are you going to stop George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk? I know Brandon Ayuk was on the there were some question marks whether he would be staying with the 49ers, if he's going to be traded, if he's going to be going someplace else. And nothing has resolved yet in regards to that. If they lose Brandon Ayuk, I could see them struggling a little bit more, especially in terms of wide receiver. But again, all of those dynamic players, they're too good to just count out and being like, yeah, the Rams could take them.
Yeah, no, it's certainly fair. I think you're exactly right that it's going to be a close shootout all season long. I don't think it's going to be like one team clearly deserves to be the division winner over the other. I think it'll be a fun division to watch for sure. It might be one of the more interesting ones in the entire NFL, even though it is kind of a two pony race there between the Rams and the 49ers. Um, it'll be fun to watch. It'll be very interesting to say the least.
Yeah.
But I think there's another division in the NFC that's even better. Um, I think the NFC North will be the best division in the NFC this year. And on top of that, I think the AFC North will be the best division in the AFC this year.
Gotcha. Interesting. Well, let's break it down. So in the NFC North, we have the Lions, we have the Vikings, we have the Packers, and we have the Bears. The AFC North, we have the Steelers, Ravens, Bengals, and Browns. I'm probably going to say that this is a bucked off take, not in the sense that the AFC North is going to be not the best division, but I do think the NFC North is going to see some struggles. I don't know if it's going to be the best division in the NFC conference. I know that there is some big question marks, with Justin Fields being traded from the Bears to go to the Steelers. There could be, there's now that kind of as close to certainty as you can get that they're going to be definitely getting a quarterback, most likely Caleb Williams in the draft. Bringing him in the building, there's obviously question marks of how well he can do in the NFL just starting off. For a lot of quarterbacks, whether they're top prospects or not, sometimes they have a learning curve. Sometimes it takes a little bit for them to learn, the jump between college to the NFL. And there's been, countless players that have said, it's a big jump. And sometimes players don't make it. Sometimes players can't make that transition. So to kind of say that the Bears now with this kind of really great roster, now you're plugging Caleb Williams in. I just don't know how well that he can succeed and be, one of these teams in the best division in their conference. The Vikings also, I feel like they have question marks. After getting rid of Kirk Cousins and dealing him to Atlanta, there's some of those question marks of, okay, well, clearly it seems that the Vikings are set up to draft a quarterback in the first round of this draft, probably most likely trading up to get one. Who's it going to be? We'll have to obviously see and speculate about that, but still you're bringing in a young guy, so I don't know if the Vikings are going to make a big push. I think out of the four teams, the Packers and the Lions could make the division the most interesting because of what we were able to see them do last season. The Lions bringing more talent to that defense that struggled last year. We'll have to see if Jared Goff can keep up, that competitive play. Keep him in Goff tier, not goof tier, as I like to put it. But, we've seen him struggle in the past with the Rams where he was not able to, be able to kind of be that consistent quarterback. He's been better in Detroit, but he also made some mistakes that led them to not going to the Super Bowl and not winning that game. So, there's those question marks. And of course, the young roster for the Packers with them bringing Josh Jacobs onto the roster. I think the Packers are going to probably are going to be division favorites to win the NFC North, just with everything that they've already shown last year, and then building on that, even on the defensive side of the ball, adding Xavier McKinney, that Packers defense is going to be even a little bit better. So, you know, I just feel like there's so many question marks regarding the NFC North in regards to especially the Bears and the Vikings, and honestly, even the Lions to an extent. So, with that being the case, is that going to be the better division? Is that going to be the best division in the NFC? I don't know. I feel like the NFC East could be the better division with all the moves that the Eagles have been making, with Saquon Barkley bringing him in, recently getting Kenny Pickett to come back up Jalen Hurts, um, Bryce Huff coming back. I know the Cowboys haven't done a lot of moves, but they still have a really good team. Other than Tyron Smith leaving, there really hasn't been like the Cowboys team as a whole is still going to be dominant and I'm interested to see what the Commanders do potentially. They're kind of in the same boat, I feel, with the quarterback situation with drafting a guy. So I don't know. I feel like that's a bucked off take to say that the NFC North will be the best division in football next year. In regards to the AFC North, I think clearly it's the most competitive, in the AFC. All four teams. So hands down, I think the AFC North being the best division in the AFC, that's a buckle winner right there. Because you just look at the other divisions, and yes, you have stalwart 1, 2 teams. Maybe you have a third contending, could potentially, but you look at the AFC East and it's in shambles. I feel, all of those teams they have a lot to prove to me this upcoming year. Um, AFC South maybe has 2 teams that are probably going to be dominant next year. And then of course you have the West, which, the Chiefs are going to be good. But yeah, no. So I think saying the NFC and the AFC North are going to be the best divisions in their respective conferences next year, I think that's a bucked off take just because I'm not sold on the NFC.
Yeah, well, see, Carson, I completely disagree. I think this take is a buckle winner. Starting in the NFC North, I mean, you look at the Lions, we know what they are. They are a great offensive team that struggled on defense last year, but added a lot of pieces in free agency this year, including DJ Reader on the defensive line. And I think they're only going to be even better this year than they were last year when they went to the NFC Championship game. You look at the Packers, they went to the playoffs and embarrassed my Dallas Cowboys in front of the world in the wild card round. They're also, I feel like, a better team going into this year. Jordan Love has one more year under his belt as a starter. I think that's the biggest thing. You mentioned they got Josh Jacobs. They added Xavier McKinney to their secondary. They are a really good team that I also expect to take a step forward. Where I disagree with you is on the Vikings and the Bears, because I know both of these teams will be relying on rookie quarterbacks to, have them be successful this year. And that's never a sure thing. Rookie quarterbacks, even the good ones, will struggle in their first year often. Guys like CJ Stroud who come in and just dominate right away are usually outliers, more so than what you would expect. Um, but I think if you look at their rosters, regardless of how prepared their rookie quarterback is for the season this year, they're still going to be a tough team. I mean, you look at Chicago, Caleb Williams, is just a special, special player. We've seen what he did in college. There's just really nothing like it. You put him on a team with, Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, what's his name, running back, DeAndre Swift, a
Yeah.
rebuilt offensive line, Cole Kmet at tight end, the White Rhino, as you called him, uh,
Yes.
a resurgent defense with Montez Sweat rushing the passer, a great secondary, good linebackers. I just, even if he's not perfect, I still think he's going to be good, at least for rookie quarterback standards in his first year. And you have that kind of surrounding cast around him. I think that's at least a 500 team, if not a playoff team. And then you look at the Minnesota Vikings. Oh man, that is a loaded team. They are the most underrated team in the league, in my opinion. Look at their 1-2 punch at wide receiver. Justin Jefferson, arguably the best wide receiver in football. Jordan Addison, first round pick from last year, who was super impressive. They got TJ Hawkinson, an explosive playmaker at tight end. Then you look at their edge rushers. They signed Jonathan Greenard, who was like a 13 sack guy last year. They signed Andrew Van Ginkel, who was an amazing pass rusher for the Dolphins last year. You look at their offensive tackle situation. They got two really good young offensive tackles on either side of that offensive line. They have all of the most important positions on their roster stacked, except for quarterback. When you have a team that's built like that, that's just a quarterback away, is what the phrase people usually use for it. I think you take a great young quarterback like Michael Penix, or if they trade up to the third overall pick and get a guy like Jaden Daniels or Drake May, that is a team that is built to compete. Because even if Drake May or Jaden Daniels, whoever they pick, doesn't end up being the best quarterback, even if they kind of struggle a little bit their rookie season, these guys are talented enough to make some throws. And with those wide receivers, you don't have to be like a great quarterback to still have a consistent passing game. And they signed AJ Dillon in free agency too, so they can really rely on that run game to carry a lot of the burden, and then just kind of go for like play action passes that are easier for the quarterback to read, get the wide receivers even more open than they usually would be, and just rely on those great offensive weapons they have to go out there and do their thing. So I think you look at the Vikings and the Bears, you look at two teams that are going to be astronomically better this year than they were last year. And I think you're looking at two teams that will absolutely be playoff contenders. When I look at the NFC North, all four teams are teams that I would not want my Cowboys to play in the playoffs or the regular season. And I don't know if there's any other division that I look at and I'm like, oh man, I'm really afraid of that team. The NFC East, I know the Giants are better, especially their defense looks pretty scary right now since they got Brian Burns, but that offense is a mess. They've got one good offensive lineman. They don't have a quarterback. They don't have a running back. They don't have a number one wide receiver. Darren Waller might be retiring. Like their entire offense is in shambles. I am not afraid of them. The Commanders, I expect them to be good this year. I don't think they'll be a bad team. They'll get a good quarterback, number 2 overall. Probably Jaden Daniels, maybe Drake May. They have some good talent on that roster. They have a great coach now in Dan Quinn. So I certainly think the NFC East will have 3 good teams this year. But the NFC North is the only team I feel like in the entire conference where all 4 teams are going to be honestly competitive for a playoff spot, which is why I believe they'll be the best team or the best conference in the NFC. AFC North, I agree with everything you said. I mean, it's the most loaded division in football. Every single team has a quarterback who has either won a Super Bowl already or who is capable of going out there and winning a Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson, Russell Wilson, Joe Burrow, and I guess Deshaun Watson. That whole situation with the Browns might be a little more confusing, but they still have a loaded roster overall. All 4 of those teams are going to be playoff contenders. I wouldn't be shocked if in the AFC, all 3 wildcard spots went to AFC North teams.
Yeah, it's definitely plausible. And you did make quite a few points that certainly are interesting, because I would agree with you that the Vikings and the Bears, if everything works out well for them, if their quarterbacks are not busts and they can just be semi-decent and getting the ball to the right people, then absolutely I could see all 4 of these teams being competitive teams. And I think you're right. When you do look at the other divisions in the NFC, there's maybe 2-3 teams that could compete, but there's not all 4 of them. Not all 4 of them. I mean, when you talk about the NFC South, it's like Bucks, Falcons, but what are the Saints and what are the Panthers doing? You know what I mean? And the same thing, could be said about the West too, because it's like you have the Niners and you have the Rams, but I guess you could put the Seahawks in there because they certainly probably won more games than they probably should have last year. But what are the Cardinals doing? Who's Kyler Murray going to throw to? That's a great question. I don't know. That both of their kind of like top receivers went to the Chiefs and went to the I'm blanking. Where's the Rondale Moore went to did he go to the Falcons? Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah. No, I mean it's definitely plausible. I think there's just too much that needs to happen for that division to be the best division in the NFC still, with some of those questions that those quarterbacks. But
Which
Yeah,
one of those, the Bears or the Vikings, which one of those teams would you say is the worst in the NFC North?
I would say the Vikings.
So let me ask you this then. Which division has a better, worst team than the Minnesota Vikings? Like, which fourth best team in any division would you take over the Vikings? And if it's none of them, doesn't that automatically make the NFC North the best division in the conference?
Yeah, because I would not say the Cardinals. I would not say the Panthers. I honestly think the only team that could potentially go up would either be I think the Giants will probably be the bottom of the NFC East this year.
I
And I know
agree.
their offense is in shambles, but I don't know.
Because
Yeah,
they're plausibly worse off at quarterback than the Vikings
yeah,
will be. Because the Vikings are going to
that's
probably
true.
go ahead of them to get a quarterback. They're definitely worse off at wide receiver. I mean, they're both really good teams at edge rusher, so you could call that like a wash. But the Vikings certainly have a better offensive line. Um, the
Yeah.
Vikings have great linebackers. So I mean, I don't know what you would see in the Giants that makes you say they're better
Yeah.
than the Vikings.
No, I know I can see where you're coming from with that. Yeah, absolutely. It's gonna be interesting what the Giants do in the draft, I think, to try to help whatever
I
they're
agree.
doing. And that
Yeah,
could that could potentially offset things. But
of course.
no,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah. Because I've not been big on the Vikings with what they've been able to do. It just seems like everything has like fallen apart and they just need to rebuild. But
They have a talented roster. A lot of
yeah,
people don't realize that, but I look at that roster. They are so good at every position except for quarterback. If
yeah,
they do what they need to do in this draft and trade up and get a guy like, Drake May or Jaden Daniels, I honestly don't know how they're not competitive for a playoff spot with all the talent they have. Unless, something serious happens, like Justin Jefferson gets hurt again, or maybe he doesn't come all the way back from his injury or something terrible like that.
yeah,
But at full health, I think 1 through 4, NFC North has the best lineup of any division in the conference.
yeah. I can definitely see that now. Yeah. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see how it all turns out.
That's right.
But I will say I definitely agree with you on the AFC North.
Yeah, I think
NFC
everybody,
North may have to be some questions. But
all those other conferences in the AFC just are not great. The AFC West, has the one team at the top, obviously the best team right now, the Chiefs. But outside of that, who is there? AFC
yeah,
South, kind of a mess right now. I know your Titans might be coming to fix things, but outside of the Texans, there's a lot of question marks.
yeah,
AFC East, the Bills, who knows if they're going to be the same team this year? They let a lot of great players go. Same thing with the Dolphins. Who
yep,
who is going to be the best team in the AFC East this year? Maybe I guess the Jets with Aaron Rodgers being fully healthy would have a chance at that. I don't know.
yeah,
It's just a lot of questions for every division outside of the North.
yeah. No, it's the North is definitely the heavyweight champion with that. Yeah. And as we were talking about the kind of NFL draft player teams trading up to get their guy, whether that be the Vikings or maybe Caleb Williams being drafted. I have a take for you, Rob, and I want to hear what you think about this. But only offensive players will be taken in the top 10 picks of the 2024 NFL draft.
Oh man, that's tough. That's tough. I think that might be a buckle winner, Carson, because think about who's number 1 through 3 is guaranteed to be quarterbacks, right? Whether the
Yeah,
Vikings trade up or not, that third pick is going to be a quarterback. 4 for the Arizona Cardinals, they're definitely going wide receiver, whether that's Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., whichever one of those two.
yep,
Um, they need a wide receiver in the worst way. And now you can say the same thing about the Chargers.
yep,
You're absolutely got to pick a wide receiver with that pick, unless they
yeah.
just
With
really have.
Keenan Allen gone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Keenan Allen's gone, Mike Williams gone. Unless they just really believe in Quentin Johnston, which I don't think they do after his rookie year. They need a wide receiver at that spot, unless they want to be picking in the top 5 again next year. Then you go to number 6, the Giants. Absolutely. They have to have a pick on the offensive side of the ball. Their offense is just completely depleted, whether that's a quarterback or an offensive lineman or a wide receiver, or even Brock Bowers, the tight end. They need something, some sort of weapon or juice for that offense because it was
Yeah.
so bad last year.
Yeah.
Then at pick number 7, let me just look up the draft order real quick because I'm kind of blanking on
That's
who.
that's the
That's
Titans. That's our pick. Yes, pick number 7.
You guys are certainly going at offense, right? Whether that's an offensive lineman or a wide receiver. Is there any
Yes.
chance they're to go defense?
No, I don't think so. It's they're either gonna go. I don't even think wide receiver is in question anymore, unless like crazy things happen that like the both tackles are off the board or whatnot. I think it's clear the Titans are either going tackle or they're gonna go Brock Bowers at tight end.
Okay. Then you get to number 8, which is the Atlanta Falcons. That might be
Yep.
one of the few question marks because they have built a really good offense there in Atlanta already.
Yeah.
But on last week's episode, I said if the Falcons signed Kirk Cousins and then drafted a wide receiver with their first round pick this year, whether that be Rome Odunze or Malik Neighbors or someone like that, they should be Super Bowl favorites. They've done half of that. They do the other half of that. I feel like that would just be the best offense in the league. I don't know if it'd be particularly close. Um, they could go defense. I mean, there are some really good defensive players in this draft. Cooper DeJean, however you say his last name, the corner out of
Yeah.
Iowa,
DeJean. Yeah.
fantastic.
Yep.
Um, Jerjon Newton, the defensive tackle, fantastic. These are definitely guys who are top 10 talents, but the offensive talent is just so overwhelming in this year's draft class. If Odunze and Bowers are still on the board when the Falcons go on the clock, they probably won't take Bowers because they have Pitts, but I see it being difficult for the Falcons to pass up on either one of those two guys.
Yeah.
Um, then next you have the Bears again.
Yep.
That could also be a place where they go defense. But they need to build up their offensive line. And the way we're talking about this right now, it seems like only one offensive lineman would have gone off the board. There's a few offensive tackles who should probably be considered top 10 worthy. Talise Fuaga being one of them. So that might be a spot where defense is possible. And then 10 is the Jets. They're absolutely going offense. There's no way they go defense with that pick.
Yeah.
That has to be like an offensive lineman or a receiver. They need to get some help on that side of the ball for Aaron Rodgers. Probably an offensive lineman, given how often maligned Zach Wilson or whoever was their quarterback, was in the pocket last year. But yeah, there's certainly a world, especially if the Falcons and the Bears with their second pick in the top 10 both go offense. I really don't know if any of those 8 other teams picking would be on the defensive side of the ball. So those are really the only 2 spots I think that might be defense.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this is absolutely a buckle winner take. I think that, as you mentioned, the two question mark spots would be the Bears' second pick and the Falcons, and that's it, because every other team that's kind of in the top 10 is kind of built for, okay, let's get our kind of rookie superstar to help juice up whatever it is, whether it's offensive line, quarterback room, wide receiver, tight end, whatever that might be. And, 1 through 7 is hands down going offensive players. And I honestly think that even the Falcons, what they could even do, because of course, we talked about the Vikings wanting to trade up to potentially get their quarterback guy. And you start to think about places in which they could trade up at. If the Falcons, I know you mentioned like taking a rookie wide receiver, but the Falcons are like, you know what? We got Kirk Cousins. We got Darnell Mooney. We got Drake London. We got Kyle Pitts. We got Bijan Robinson. Maybe do we go tackle? Maybe they'll grab a tackle. But like, if they're like, you know what? It's better for us to trade back, then there we go. Then you already have, then the Vikings could potentially be coming up, or potentially the Raiders or the Broncos,
Yeah.
because they also want to get their quarterbacks. So, and they know that they have to beat out, if they can't get in the top 3, which I don't think they can, because I'm pretty sure it's going to go Bears pick a quarterback, Commanders pick a quarterback, and then the Patriots pick a quarterback. So you have to start thinking of like, okay, well, if they're going to trade up, the Cardinals, I don't know if they're gonna trade down, because I feel like if they do, they're gonna be losing out on a guy that could be like a dynamic duo with Kyler Murray in a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Malik Neighbors. And so, like, I feel like for them, they are probably going to stay. I feel like the Chargers probably would want to stay up there as well to get another receiver since they need all that help with all the players, the max exodus of people leaving not San Diego, almost said that, LA now. Um, and it's like so then you really think about those spots, and I could realistically see, maybe even my Titans trading back. But regardless of that, I could see more the Falcons and the Bears second pick being those two spots, which could get some movement from the teams like the Vikings, Raiders, or Broncos, trading up. So then that would solidify offensive picks because most likely they would be going quarterback. So then you have the top 10 right there where you could potentially have 4 or 5 quarterbacks going in the top 10.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think at least 5 quarterbacks will go in the top 10. I think the Vikings trade up target might actually be the Patriots at number 3 because I've
Oh,
been seeing a lot of people saying that the Patriots are not high on Drake May.
mhm.
So if the Commanders go Jaden Daniels number 2, the Patriots are going to move to look out of that number 3 spot. And that's what I think the Vikings are targeting with their, 2 first-round picks now after that trade they made. So I wouldn't be shocked if that's where the Vikings move, given a commander selection of Jaden Daniels, which obviously is no guarantee. If they take
Yeah.
Drake May, I think the Patriots stand pat and take Jaden Daniels. And then I don't know exactly where the Vikings end up trading up to. Like you said, probably the Falcons would be a really good one, but I don't know if they need 2 first-round picks to move up 3 spots. So it'll be fascinating to watch all that unfold.
Yeah.
Um, I think the Giants have a high probability of going quarterback. So that would be 5 teams right there, all going quarterback, not even in the top 10, but the top 6.
Yeah.
Um, I would be shocked if we get through the top 10 and not at least 5 quarterbacks are off the board. So you're at with 5 quarterbacks going in the top 10 plus 2 wide receivers pretty much guaranteed, and at least one like elite tight end and at least 1 or 2 elite offensive linemen in this draft class. It's certainly very plausible we are going to see all 10 first picks in the draft be offensive talent.
Yeah.
Um, okay, Carson, I have another sports take for you, and this one is kind
Okay.
of wild, but I really am on this bandwagon. Okay, I think the Los Angeles Chargers are going to win the AFC West this year.
I don't know which, wagon you got on with what band, but clearly I think you are mistook because this is a bucked off take. I do not think the Chargers will win the AFC West this season. I just, with what has happened and what has transpired in free agency, I feel like it's been a roller coaster for Chargers fans in general because you get Jim Harbaugh to come into the building as your kind of new coach, and you're like, let's go. Because he's going to start to figure out the coaching deficiencies that were in LA for the Chargers and start to figure that out. You have Justin Herbert, who I still think is going to be a generational talent. Um, but as we saw with free agency, the Chargers just kind of everybody just kind of left. You had Keenan Williams going to the Bears, and some of their other players that just there isn't who is Justin Herbert going to throw the ball to? Quentin Johnston, who played terrible at wide receiver last year. Obviously there's always that hope he'll bounce back, have a better season. Um, Austin Eckler is not on the Chargers anymore. Um, so there's a lot of holes, and I know a lot of that had to do with cap space and them not being able to pay who it is that they need to pay. I know they re-signed Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, so they'll have at least some defensive power. But realistically, this is a league in which unless you have a quarterback who can throw the ball to expert level wide receivers and options, you're not going to succeed. And especially not in a division where you already have the last 2 years Super Bowl champions in the Kansas City Chiefs with what they can put together with very little. It seems like all they need is Kelsey, Mahomes, and Andy Reid, and they can go win a Super Bowl. Of course, they had obviously help, but the Chiefs even are going to be a better team next year. Trading, getting Hollywood Brown from the Cardinals is only going to be another great target for Mahomes to throw to, in addition to Rashid Rice growing. And so the Chiefs are still going to be dominant. Their defense is still going to be dominant. Um, the Raiders are another team that I think people could be sleeping on. That defensive duo between Christian Wilkins that they got from the Dolphins and Max Crosby, that's good. Imagine being an offensive line and you have those two guys lined up against you. That's going to be crazy to see in the season. And I know, Las Vegas may not, have the talent on the offensive side outside of Devontae Adams, who they're going to be bringing in. We'll have to see in terms of quarterback wise. So that's going to be a question mark. But the Broncos too. That's also a question mark. But I think the real big team for the Chargers is going to be the Chiefs, and I just don't see how this Chargers team, as it is right now, you may have a great coach, you may have some great defensive pieces, you may have Justin Herbert, but where else is that? Where's the scoring coming from? Who are you going to be throwing the ball to? And even if you pick up a rookie wide receiver in the draft, it seems a little far-fetched for the Chargers to win that division. Could they turn things around and become second in that division? That's certainly possible, with the Raiders and Broncos still trying to figure out what they need to be doing. But I don't know how the Chiefs aren't going to be winning their division again this year, unless something drastic happens to them in the season.
Okay. Well, I think the key to this whole thing is what you said about Justin Herbert way back at the beginning. You said he is a generational quarterback. And I agree with you. I think he is one of the top three quarterbacks in the entire NFL right now. Obviously, he's no Mahomes. No one is Mahomes. Mahomes is special and just on another level entirely. Um, but Herbert is still fantastic. He makes superhuman throws pretty much every time he plays. I love watching Justin Herbert just get out there and rip the ball downfield. I know the question we have right now is, well, who's he going to be throwing the ball to? But you look at the top two wide receivers in the draft this year, Malik Nabers and Marvin Harrison Jr. They are two of the most talented wide receivers that have been available in the draft in at least the past 10 years. I think they both might be historically good wide receivers coming out of the draft this year. So whether they get Malik Nabers or Marvin Harrison Jr., they are going to be adding one of the best receivers in the entire league to their roster. A young guy, an explosive guy, someone who's going to go out there and make plays. On the other end, they'll have Quentin Johnston, who, we talked about was really bad for them last year, had a lot of drops and key moments, but he has all the physical tools to make it work. The reason he had so many drops is because he was open so much and he was getting the ball thrown to him a lot. Even on that one critical fourth, well, there were several of these, but there were several critical plays. It was like fourth down. Justin Herbert was looking for a guy to go to. Quentin Johnston was open. He was ready to be that guy. But when the moment presented itself and the ball hit him in the chest, he just dropped it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we'll see a much better version of him this year. I think he'll probably have overcome that. I think he might have had a little bit of like rookie, stuff going on last year where he was just kind of, growing up a little bit, getting used to the fact that he was playing at the NFL level instead of just the college level. But I think you could see him have a resurgence. So now all of a sudden you have two dynamic playmakers on the outside for the Chargers. This is where I think the difference comes in. The Chiefs, yeah, they might have Hollywood Brown, yeah, they might have Rashid Rice, but those guys are no match for either Malik Nabers or Marvin Harrison Jr. and Quentin Johnston. I think the Chargers will have the much better wide receiver room, and I think they still have a generational quarterback. So I think their offense is going to be absolutely electric, no matter which defense it gets put up against. Because another thing, I don't know if the Chiefs defense will be as good this year as it was last year, because it was like historically good last year.
Mm-hmm.
They've lost, some key pieces, some of their linebackers. Sneed might not be there. He might get
Yep.
traded. Um, so the Chiefs will have a worse defense than they did last year. The Chargers will have a much better offense, in my opinion. And now the Chargers are going to have someone who brings a winning culture with him. Harbaugh is a guy who knows how to win. You know, he went to the Super Bowl when he was the coach of the 49ers. He won with Michigan just this past year in college football. You know, he is a guy that knows what he has to do to get his team where it needs to be. You take two elite wide receivers, a generational quarterback, some good pieces still there on defense, and a coach who knows how to win. I think you have a team that could compete for it all. Obviously, like I said, Mahomes is on another level. And I don't expect, you know, the Chargers to sweep the Chiefs or anything like that. I think if anything, they'll probably split their series with the Chiefs, if not get outright swept by them. But the Chiefs, you know, they were kind of shaky throughout the regular season last year. They've been shaky in the regular season the past couple of years. I think you'll see the Chargers come out and have a much better regular season than the Kansas City Chiefs do. Does that mean that the Chargers are going to win the AFC over the Chiefs? No, I don't necessarily agree with that sentiment because Mahomes just turns to another level in the playoffs. You know, he just there's something different about Mahomes when he's in the playoffs. Regular season, though, I bet you the Chargers will have more wins and win the AFC West as opposed to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Do you think Jim Harbaugh is a better coach than Andy Reid?
I think they're probably close to equivalent. I mean, I know Andy Reid has proven, you know, he's a Super Bowl winner. Harbaugh's never done that. Um, so Andy Reid has that leg up on him. Andy Reid is certainly like an offensive genius in a way that Harbaugh just simply is not. Um, so Harbaugh's certainly not as good as Andy Reid, but he's still an amazing coach, and I think he'll have a more talented team than Andy Reid does. So even though Andy Reid will be a better coach and Mahomes will be a better quarterback, I think the wide receiver room especially will make the difference for the Chargers next year. And also, I think the Chargers defense will be better than the Chiefs defense. I know it wasn't great last year, but I definitely expect them to address that through the draft and get some great pieces, you know, to build that up a little bit. So I think the Chargers will overall have a more talented team and overall have more regular season success than the Kansas City Chiefs.
Who do the Chargers have at tight end and running back then?
They don't really have anyone notable right now, and that's
Okay.
definitely two big holes on their roster. But I could ask you the same thing about the Chiefs. Who do they have at tight end? I know they have Travis Kelsey, but
Travis
he's
Kelce.
one. He was not great last year. He didn't even break 1,000 yards last year. I know he
Yeah,
came up in big moments in the playoffs. You know, but he's fading away. He's not the same Travis Kelsey anymore. I think he was.
I see. I would disagree. I would definitely disagree because the reason I think we didn't see a better Travis Kelce last year and we only saw it pick up in the playoffs is because who else was Mahomes throwing the ball to? Rice was not picking it up. And so Kelsey ended up being double teamed, covered most of the time in the season. And I think that led to his lower numbers. And I feel like that sometimes can get overlooked a little bit because of the fact that, you know, some of these better players, if they're the only weapon on offense, whether it's receiver, tight end, running back, if that's your very few weapons, defenses lock in on that. And they know that. It's not like teams walk in to play the Chiefs and they're like, oh, I wonder who Mahomes is going to throw to, you know, if there is anybody, and if Rashid Rice is it, you know, and then a bunch of nobodies, obviously excluding Kadarius Toney, who is a rap god. But anyways, young Joka. But you know, even he didn't have a great season. So like, I think that was a lot of the reason why Travis Kelsey didn't end up shocking the stats so much. And I think that just and even Pacheco, you know, he was brilliant for the Chiefs. And so I don't know, like in order to have a good quarterback, you can't just be throwing the ball all the time. You need to be able to run it. And with the Chargers, I just don't know what that option is going to be. And I think they also struggle offensive line wise. So with that being the case too, if your offensive line can it protect first of all Justin Herbert? And if it can, that's great. But can it also be able to have you take a running back who may not be a top name and make him look good? Because he may not be able to have the same vision on the field as some of these other top guys. So can that offensive line work in a way to make the rushing attack good? And if not, well then, you know, how many teams have we seen have great quarterbacks, no running game, and they can't get anywhere? So I don't know. I feel like the Chargers have just too many holes, and I get the winning culture with Jim Harbaugh that he's bringing. I get Justin Herbert's a generational talent. I get they could draft a guy that could be the next Justin Jefferson, you know. But still, and then that's also hoping that Quentin Johnston can catch balls because unfortunately, I mean, as I mentioned, Kadarius Toney before, he had a great, I mean, an iffy start to this his years with the Giants, and then he came to the Chiefs, had a pretty good year, but then this whole year he's just dropped passes. It was historically bad for how many drop passes he had. And now no one trusts him. So I don't know, like that could be the thing too, that level of trust with Quentin Johnston. Like Justin Herbert may be like, look, I don't know if I trust you to throw the ball to because of that drop tendency. So I don't know. I think the Chargers just have too many holes right now. Ask me this question next year, could be a different one with what they're able to do. But I just think right now, as I'm sitting on it, I just don't see the Chargers beating out the Chiefs, even if the Chiefs had a similar season like they did last year, where it was kind of iffy.
Yeah, no, it's certainly a fair argument to make. But at least at the running back position, I think the Chargers will be fine because that's a position where, it's really easy to find good players. Even in this draft class where it's not particularly loaded at running back, I think there's still going to be good guys there in the third and fourth round for the
Of
Chargers to get.
course.
And I mean, Austin Eckler kind of seemed washed last season, so it was probably
Yeah.
smarter for them to move on. Tight end, that might be a problem area for the Chargers. They're definitely not going to take, well, I guess they could certainly take Brock Bowers, but I have a feeling they'll probably go wide receiver instead. And if they pass up on Brock Bowers in the first round, there's not too many great tight ends after him this year's draft. So that could still be a problem area for them the whole season. Their defense, I really like their edge rushers and I really like their safeties. I think they'll definitely add a lot to it. Their
Yeah.
offensive line, it has a lot of young guys on it. Zion and Rashawn Slater. And, the right side of the offensive line's a little shaky, so maybe they'll address that a little bit in the draft because it is a loaded offensive tackle class. Um, so yeah, they definitely have holes they need to fill, and we'll see what happens in the draft. But I just think when you have that combination of elite wide receivers, elite quarterback, and a winning coach, especially in this like passing first league, I think you can go out there and win a lot of football games, at least in the regular season. I think those holes you mentioned might prohibit them from being successful postseason wise, but I would not be surprised at all if the Chargers went out there and surprised a lot of people this season.
Yeah. And another thing too is I feel like the Chiefs are going to be picking up maybe not in the first round, but I feel like they're going to go receiver with just how much loaded talent there is in the drafted wide receiver. They may not be getting Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr. or Roma Dunze, but there's certainly great people to pick up even at 32
Oh yeah.
that they could potentially even pick up. And even if they don't go receiver first round, they could easily pick up a fantastic cornerback, edge rusher, whatever that might be, to fill one of the holes that, you know, maybe Snead leaves and then they replace him with that, or they trade Snead and stuff like that. So, um, yeah, I only think the Chiefs team will be better next year. I just really do. And, especially with them keeping Chris Jones, and they're going to try everything possible. They're going to do everything they can to make the three-peat work. So much so that they may sacrifice the next number of seasons of being mediocre because they spent too much this year and they can't afford next year and whatnot. But I feel like with this opportunity for the Chiefs, they're going to do everything possible to make it a reality, to be the first team to do it.
Yeah, no, I would not be shocked if they went Xavier Worthy either in the first round or
Yeah,
second if he makes it down the
yeah,
line. He just reminds you of Tyreek Hill, man. I mean, he's got that
absolutely.
speed that Tyreek does, setting the record for fastest 40-yard dash time at the combine. But, he's not like one of these, John Ross guys that just runs really fast in a straight line and can't do anything else. He is an amazing route runner. He puts in so much effort every time he plays. He's one of those guys who will never quit until the whistle blows. I love that kid. I think if he's still there at 32 for the Chiefs, or that would be the perfect selection for them. Would really complete their wide receiver room. But even if the Chiefs do have a great draft, I still there's just something about them that makes them peter out in the regular season. I don't know if it's just Super Bowl hangover, whatever. They're like, these games don't even feel like they matter that much because we know once we get to the playoffs, we're just going to go, beast mode and destroy everyone that gets put in front of us. They just seem like sleepy and tired, almost bored is probably the best word I can use when they're playing regular season games. And, maybe after you've won two Super Bowls in a row, you're entitled to feel bored in regular season games. Because they're obviously still going to win a bunch of them this year. But the Chargers just might win a few more.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't think they're good enough to compete with the Chiefs in the playoffs, but I wouldn't be surprised if they won the division this year.
Well, that is a very bold take, and I still think it's a bucked off take. But we will see how that um, starts to come together for both of those teams when we get closer to the season. Well, Rob, this has been kind of brought up recently with free agency and bigger moves happening, especially in regards to Russell Wilson coming to the Pittsburgh Steelers, Kenny Pickett throwing a little fit, requesting a trade, and then out he goes to the Eagles. But when you look back at some of these past quarterback classes, it's very interesting to look at the individuals in those classes. And at that time, of course, people were talking about them as being huge prospects, guys that could change their teams, acquisitions that could, could be the piece that these teams are looking for. And now looking back, of course, hindsight being 2020, we've seen them in the league for a little bit now. What is the reality of the situation? So, Rob, the take I have for you is that the 2022 quarterback class, the 2022 draft class of quarterbacks, was the worst in recent times.
Yeah, Carson, I think that's bucked off. That's a bucked off take. I believe the 2021 draft class was worse, and let me explain why. So
Okay.
in 2021, you get guys like Trey Lance, Zach Wilson, Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields. 2022, you had Kenny Pickett, Desmond Ritter, Matt Corral, Bailey Zappi, and Brock Purdy. Um, so you look at 2021, Trey Lance, I love you so much. I think you're the guy that will replace Dak Prescott eventually. Don't get me wrong, but 2021, there's just not really anyone there that impresses you. I mean, Trey Lance hasn't done anything yet. Zach Wilson hasn't done anything yet. Trevor Lawrence, he was good for a year, but was he good last year? Was he really? I mean, what did he do last year? He led the Jaguars to not being able to win the AFC South, which was like after they had that huge lead at the beginning of the season. Justin Fields, he wasn't able to do anything in Chicago. As much as you may argue that that was about supporting cast, you look at the 2022 draft class, it's not really a lot different. A lot of these guys just ended up doing absolutely nothing wherever they went. But 2022 has one exception to that, and that's Brock Purdy. He, obviously took his team to a Super Bowl and to an NFC Championship game 2 years in a row. I know he has a ton of talent around him and a great supporting cast. Obviously, maybe one of the best supporting casts in the league. But it still takes someone special to do that. And if you lined up all the guys from the 2021 and the 2022 draft class and said, do you think they could do what Brock Purdy did? I mean, maybe Trevor Lawrence, maybe, but the rest of those guys, absolutely not. Um, to me, I think the best measure of a quarterback class is how many good starters you get out of that quarterback class. And I think each class had one starter that is of note, and that's Brock Purdy in 2022 and Trevor Lawrence 2021. So to me, then the question really becomes, well, which one of those two guys is better? And I think, at least on paper, you have to go with Brock Purdy because he's had much more success in less time than Trevor Lawrence has ever had. Now, obviously, Brock has way, way, way better supporting cast than Trevor Lawrence has ever had at any point in his career. So maybe, it's kind of hard to compare them because it's not like, apples to apples. It's apples to oranges for sure. Uh, there's not really any way to objectively be like, well, if the positions were flipped and Trevor Lawrence was with the Niners and, Brock Purdy was with the Jaguars, who knows what would have happened. Um, so I can't definitively say that Brock Purdy is better than Trevor Lawrence. I don't think anybody can. But I will say that Brock Purdy's had a better career so far. Um, and at least from what we can see and what we can know, Brock Purdy is the better quarterback than Trevor Lawrence, which makes the 2022 draft class better than the 2021 draft class, which means the 2021 quarterback draft class is the worst one in recent times.
Well, Rob, I very much disagree with you on this. And I understand kind of what you're getting at, where you're like taking the best of both classes and looking at them. But I think honestly, each class should be looked at as a whole and what they were able to do on the field. Now, of course, in the 2021 class, you had a lot of guys that went in the first round. In the 2022 class, I think Kenny Pickett was the only first rounder potentially, or I no, was he first round or second round?
He was in the first round.
He
He
was
was
in the
the only
first
first
round.
round guy.
So, but still, so you already have 5-to-1 ratio in terms of that. And this is why I think the 2022 quarterback class was the worst, because the quarterbacks that were drafted in each class, the similarities is that these guys were brought into these teams thinking that this could be our next franchise guy. Of course, teams aren't going to be drafting people that are like, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. That's they do research. They look at, is he going to fit in our system? Is he going to work well? His attributes, his skills. So each of these teams picked these players at these positions, quarterback wise, in the position that they were in the draft, to fulfill a need on their team. So I think that's the similarity that we have. And granted, the 2021 class was quarterbacks was much higher need than in 2022 in terms of talent wise coming out of college, but also in terms of NFL team wise when it came to, okay, what's that position that we need to be filled. Quarterback, kind of like as you were mentioning with the Vikings, where it's like our team is built around it. We need the quarterback. But when you look at the guys in each draft class, I really do feel that 2021 draft class was a lot better than 2022 with what these guys were able to do on the field. Now, granted, the only exception to that is Brock Purdy. And Brock Purdy, of course, stepped in, when the previous quarterback went down, and he stole the show. And he's done great things, which has been great. But outside of Brock Purdy, you have Kenny Pickett, and he was the top quarterback gone in 2022. He has not shaped up in Pittsburgh as much as Pittsburgh wants him to shape up to be that guy. I feel like he was actually put in there a lot longer than he probably should because of the hopes that he would turn into something. But now he's out the door. Now he's with the Eagles. Now he's going to be a backup quarterback, if not quarterback 3 on the Eagles roster. And the question really becomes like, you went from Pittsburgh, where that gave you the best idea to be a starting quarterback in this league, to somehow fix what you did last couple seasons, try to redo it. Russell Wilson comes in the building, but instead, I just don't understand why as soon as Russell comes in, you instantaneously want out. I think that was really stupid on his part. But regardless, Kenny Pickett's now gone. So he's not going to be the starting quarterback in Philadelphia unless something happens to Jalen Hurts. That's the writing on the wall. There's not going to be a quarterback battle, for my knowledge, because Jalen Hurts is the system. He's with the system that the Philadelphia Eagles want to run. Kenny Pickett's not. So then you look at the next quarterbacks that went off the board, and that was Desmond Ridder to the Falcons, and then Malik Willis that came to the Titans. Both of those guys were huge coming out. Literally, like, the hype around Malik Willis was big, and the only thing was like, well, he came from Liberty, and how good is Liberty's program? That certainly was something that went against him, but still, a lot of Titans fans thought that he was going to be that guy. And there's still Titans fans to this day who, before really, I would say there was a lot more before Will Levis came and really showed off in that 4-touchdown game rookie debut against the Falcons. That really turned a lot of people off of the Malik Willis train. But there still is Titans fans who think Malik Willis should still deserve another shot because they still has the talent. But the reality on the ground is that he could not shape up to be the guy that Tennessee needed. And there was a couple times that he played games. One of the bigger games that he was in was against the Chiefs. and they were neck and neck. And that game, I believe, went to overtime. It was a crazy game. I think it was on Thursday night or something like that, maybe Sunday night. It was a bigger game. They thought the Chiefs were just going to run away with it, but Malik Willis kind of stepped in and did what he needed to do. But ultimately, it was his mistakes that lost them the game. But other than that, what has he done? He's done nothing. And what is his designation? He's a quarterback two last year until Will Levis stepped in. So clearly he's not even the quarterback two. So now he's quarterback three. And now on this year, he's the quarterback three because I think with the signing of Mason Rudolph, it's going to be Will Levis, Mason Rudolph, and then Malik Willis. So you have a quarterback three. Desmond Ridder, we all saw how that worked with the Falcons. He's not even on the team anymore. And then you keep going down the list. You have Bailey Zappi. He had 1, 2 games in a row where things went well. And then he was benched again for Mac Jones. And it was the constant benching, who gets benched, and Bailey Zappi is not going to be probably the start of this year. I feel like the Patriots are going to start Jacoby Brissett over Bailey Zappi if that's the option, and of course there's that speculation they'll bring in that new rookie and he'll probably be the starter. And then like you have Sam Howell, who, they tried to make him work in Washington and it didn't. And now he's going to Seattle in a backup kind of position to Geno Smith. And then the last one I wanted to mention, which is kind of neat with our USFL ties, is Matt Corral. And he was supposed to do great things with the Panthers and didn't. And so now he's going to could be the starting quarterback for the Birmingham Stallions. But even on that roster, it's not even set in stone that he will be that starting quarterback. So you look at that quarterback class as a whole and all the guys I just listed and named. And outside of Brock Purdy, all of these guys are in backup or quarterback three positions. Some of them aren't even in the league anymore. Matt Corral is in the UFL. And these guys are being traded for nothing, pretty much, to other teams to maybe be a backup, maybe, if they even get playing time. Now, on the flip side, you look at the 2021 class. Trevor Lawrence had considerable play time. Mac Jones had considerable play time. And, I think a lot of people tend to forget, but that first season that Mac Jones had was really good. He led the Patriots to a playoffs where they got blown out by the Bills, unfortunately, because they just couldn't keep up with them. But still, he led them there. And the Patriots only decreased in talent around him. And then now you're expecting him to continue to do better. And of course, I know there was mistakes that he made and critical errors and throws that was just like, what are you doing? But the talent wasn't there either. Zach Wilson, unfortunately, didn't work out for the Jets, but he still got more playing time due to injury than any of these other kind of guys. And he beat the Eagles. Shall we go back to that this past season? That was probably the biggest thing of his career. He beat the Eagles. And I know you are happy about that, Rob, and so, which that paved the way for the Cowboys to win the division. We haven't seen what Trey Lance can do, but I do think that he can be a good quarterback. Justin Fields, I know that, it may not have worked in Chicago, especially how Chicago is trying to build that team. And again, that dichotomy between new GM, new coach, and bringing in a guy they didn't even really have a choice picking. They just kind of, he was there when they came in. I think Justin Fields' career might have a resurgence in Pittsburgh. I think he could do really well in that Pittsburgh offense, depending on how Russell Wilson does and who's going to be that starting quarterback. I think there could be a quarterback battle. But, you also have people like Kyle Trask and Davis Mills who've really also failed. But still, you look at these two quarterback classes, and granted, both of them are poor. There's not a lot of success in these quarterback classes. So as you mentioned, it's like apples to oranges. Which one's worse? Which one went moldy first? But I still think that 2021 is a little bit ahead of 2022 because you still have Trey Lance, who's a capable quarterback with Dallas. Zach Wilson is probably going to be on the way out. The Jacksonville Jaguars are pretty much tied to Trevor Lawrence. I don't think there's going to be a change. And bringing in Gabe Davis could maybe help something. I don't think so. Maybe that's a little biased, as I'm not a huge fan of the Jaguars personally. But, Mac Jones being also in Jacksonville, who knows? Trevor Lawrence may mess up and Mac Jones comes in and maybe we see Mac Jones rookie year. and him stepping in and proving that, he can still do it with people around him. So I don't know. And I think Justin Fields shouldn't be written off yet. I know he was only traded for a conditional sixth, but I think there's a lot more talent as a whole in the 2021 class than in the 2022 because I don't see Pickett, Willis, Ritter, or Zappy or Howell getting starting positions anytime soon. And I think that in a way, pushes that class to be worse than 2021 because I could absolutely see Trey Lance in a starting position, Trevor Lawrence, of course, in a starting position, Justin Fields in a starting position. I could even see Mac Jones in a starting position again in the right place. So I think basing it off of that, personally, I think that this is a buckle winner take that the 2022 quarterback class is the worst in most recent times.
See, the problem I have with that take is that you're trying to argue that like Justin Fields is better than Kenny Pickett. And I think the issue with that is that all of the guys that we mentioned in both of these draft classes outside of Brock Purdy and Trevor Lawrence have done absolutely nothing. They have accomplished nothing. All of them are backups now. There's not a single starter on that list between both draft classes. So saying, oh yeah, these backups and third stringers are better than these backups and third stringers, I don't know if that's a tenable argument. And I mean, the guys from 2022 did accomplish some stuff. I mean, like, Sam Howell almost led the league in passing yards this year. He was okay for the Commanders considering how bad of a team he was on, how bad of a situation he was in overall. Bailey Zappi won a few games for the Patriots. Kenny Pickett beat Lamar Jackson and the Ravens in the beginning of this season. You know,
They always go back and forth though. Those games are like you can never like both teams show up and they're just like, wait, we're not gonna play like we've been playing. But yeah, no, I get what you're saying. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Uh, so you look at these draft classes, and it's one guy and a bunch of nothing, and that's what they have right now. I will say, if Justin Fields goes to the Steelers and he turns into something and he's actually good with them, that would make me change my whole take here. I would say then for sure 2021 is better than 2022. So you ask me this next year, my answer might be completely different depending on what happens with Justin Fields. But as of right now, you have a bunch of nothing and two guys who have become franchise quarterbacks. And between those two franchise quarterbacks, one of them has one playoff win, and one of them has what, like 6 or 7 now, and he was in the league for one less year than the other guy. To me, success in football is defined by playoff wins. So you look at these draft classes, and you're comparing one guy to one guy, playoff wins to playoff wins. That makes the draft class with Brock Purdy 2022 more successful than the one with Trevor Lawrence 2021.
That's fair. I still think you're wrong, but that's fair.
We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. Like I said,
We
Justin
will.
Fields, so
I think he still is underrated. I still think Justin Fields can absolutely go and shine, especially in Pittsburgh. I think a new place is going to really revitalize his career where, you may not have coaching staff that are already down on you because you weren't their guy and your supporting cast may have been poor leading up to this past season with, of course, DJ Moore and whatnot. So,
he's
but we'll
got the
see.
talent. He got the talent. He could definitely be a good player. It's just a matter of him putting it all together.
Yeah, absolutely. All righty. Well, we are going to be moving on to our next segment, the Red Zone Rodeo Rowdy Rankings. And of course, with the huge news and constant news that you all have probably been bombarded with on all of the different sports apps that you may be connected in and linked with and whatnot, of all the different moves and what's going on, it only seems right for us to tackle in our Rowdy Rankings which teams had the best free agency and which teams had the worst free agency. So we're going to start off with our Rowdy rankings on the 5 teams that we think had the best free agency. So Rob, who do we think is number 1?
Number one, I think it's clearly the Atlanta Falcons. They went from being a joke last year to being a serious contender this year, and they did that all just by bringing in Kirk Cousins. Having a franchise quarterback like that who can win you regular season games, he hasn't proven himself in the playoffs yet, but he's got the talent for it. Having a guy like that under center changes, not just the outlook of your fans, but the outlook of your players, the confidence they have in themselves. I expect Kirk Cousins to single-handedly revive Kyle Pitt's career. He's done pretty much nothing since he got drafted. Even though he had such high expectations, I think Kyle Pitts is going to be one of the best tight ends in football this year. He's going to, finally have a quarterback who knows how to throw him the ball. He hasn't had that his entire career. So I just expect the entire team to be transformed this year as opposed to last year. And not only did they get Kirk, but they went out and they got pieces to put around him like Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore. They have a lot of speed, a lot of explosiveness on the wide receiver position now. I fully expect them to have a completely different team, a completely different outlook this year. And if that's what you do in free agency, you completely shift your team from, bottom of the barrel to contender. I think that deserves to be the number one free agency we had in the NFL this year.
Absolutely. And just to echo a little bit of that, like Darnell Mooney is a playmaker. What he was able to do in Chicago gets kind of overlooked because he's just been on bad teams. And I know that I have hope for Justin Fields and resurrecting his career in Pittsburgh, but he was not the best with, especially with a poor offensive line, with getting the ball even close to Darnell Mooney. And Mooney is just quick. He's just the way he can get separation. Um, it's definitely someone that the Falcons bringing in to add with Drake London, to add with Kyle Pitts, to add with, that whole offensive scheme, Rondell Moore, you're absolutely right. The Falcons literally went out there and they were like, you know what? How do we change our entire team to make it competitive? And they did it in free agency in a week. So they may have spent a lot of money to do it, but I think they're going to be greatly appreciative of the result. Because there's a lot of teams, and I'm sure we'll be getting into them when we get into our top 5 with our worst free agency. There are a lot of teams that had a lot of money, and the Falcons definitely spent theirs wisely. At number 2, we have my boys, the Tennessee Titans. I think the Titans absolutely went out and struck gold. This is probably one of the first times, especially looking back, where we have a competent general manager to go out and a competent coach, first of all, too, to really go out there and make a difference, to start making a difference in free agency. If you look at the past Tennessee Titans teams, there has not been much in free agency that has transpired, and it's gotten them into the hole that they found themselves in at the start of this kind of season, at the end of last season and moving into this one, where you have holes all over the place, players that want more money, but we're not going to give them because we can't really, we have too many other holes to look at, and what do we do? But the Tennessee Titans really went out there and they started to plug some of those holes. And, first and foremost, I know he probably wasn't the biggest name, but adding that center out of the Broncos, Lloyd Cushenberry, was big to start to restabilize that offensive line that has been so worrisome for the past number of years. And not only that, but just, I believe, and a lot of people believe, that the Titans have something really special in Will Levis. And especially with a quarterback like that you think could be that guy for the next number of years, could be that next Patrick Mahomes, could be that guy, you need to protect him. You can't just have him being hit and hurt, and all, because you'll end up like Andrew Luck, where Andrew Luck could have done great things for the Colts, but he's retiring early because he just hit too many times. He's injured, So that was a great addition. But not only did they start to kind of rework the offensive line, they went out and they got Tony Pollard, which was probably one of the bigger first names that they signed, which I know, Rob, you're probably pretty heartbroken over. I know there was a lot of speculation that the Cowboys and Titans were going to be doing a swap at running back, that they would get Derrick Henry and we would get Tony Pollard when the Tony Pollard news broke. But unfortunately for the Cowboys, they did nothing. And instead, Lamar Jackson is going to enjoy the king in Baltimore, which I am still a little mad and angry that he went to the Ravens, a team that I have deep dislike for. But regardless of that, he kind of fits what the Ravens want to do, where it's just kind of just bruising and running. So, obviously I wish Derrick Henry the best. But bringing in a guy like Tony Pollard, was really big for the Titans to kind of replace some of that hole at running back. And I think Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, the rookie we drafted last year, is going to be a great dynamic duo. And so they restabilize that. And then they go out, and this is the one that I think shocked me the most in terms of free agency. And that was the acquisition of Calvin Ridley. And I kid you not, I literally like the top teams that were looking at him was, of course, Ben being re-signed to the Jaguars. There was talks that he could go to the Patriots, and I know Patriots fans were pretty happy, would have been pretty happy with him coming there. And honestly, I didn't think that the Titans were even on the radar for Calvin Ridley. And so when the news broke and I was at work and I got the notification on my watch and I looked at it and I was like, no way. No way that they literally went out. Like, this is unheard of. I know for some teams it might be like, okay, great, you went out and you signed a good wide receiver. But this like never happens for the Titans in terms of this period of the time of the year in football. That most of the times we're like the Cowboys, which did nothing. So I hate to keep saying that, but it's true. It's true. And the roles are reversed for the first time in a long time. And I'm as many Titans fans are, I am super stoked that Calvin Ridley is in. No, we did not overpay for him. Squandering that right now. He is going to be a top guy and a big guy that will be, doing things with DeAndre Hopkins, uh, being that person who can walk in and start to make a difference in the wide receiver room. So the Titans are at number 2. And after all of that stuff, because not only did they fix their offensive line, they fixed the whole Derrick Henry absence with going to Baltimore and they brought in talent in the wide receiver room. There's definitely questions, defensive side of the ball. Hopefully we address that in the draft, and offensive line as well. There still needs some of that help. But I think the Titans absolutely swung big and got some great additions to help them compete in this division, which is heating up. The AFC South is not a joke anymore. A lot of great teams. And to stay competitive, you need some of these top names and top people. And I believe, like with the Falcons, they brought in the talent that they needed to make a difference, and they used their money wisely.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that they should be at number 2 because they completely switched their situation around from last year. Last year, they were bottom of the barrel team. Outlook wasn't great, picking top 10 in the draft, but they added the guys that they needed to. Starting with Calvin Ridley, I feel like he was way, way overpaid. I mean, I don't think he's $100 million or $95 million wide receiver, whatever amount he got paid. I think if
92.
you 92. I think if you were going to spend that on a wide receiver, it probably should have been on 24-year-old AJ Brown, all pro AJ Brown, rather than 30-year-old
I will address this.
Pro
Keep going. I
Bowler
will address
one time, Calvin Ridley. So that move kind of confused me, but at the same time, Calvin Ridley is a legit wide receiver. Maybe not a absolute stud like AJ Brown or CeeDee Lamb or someone like that, but he'll be a productive guy. Pairing him with D Hop and maybe a weapon in the draft, and what's his name, Burks, Traylon
Traylon Burks.
Burks. Yeah. Uh, they should have a solid group of weapons this year for Will Levis to target. So that was definitely something that they really needed to address. They might have overpaid to do it, but that's just kind of what happens in free agency. The two most underrated pickups, I thought Pollard was a fantastic pickup for the Titans. He was bad to start last year, coming off of his injury. He did not look like his old self. But at the end of the season, he finally started to return to form. He forced like the most missed tackles in the league over that last stretch of games there. He was just turning into the old Tony Pollard before our eyes. He had his burst back and his agility, and it was really exciting to see that, which is why I kind of hope the Cowboys will retain him this year. Um, Having that Tony Pollard with the Titans will definitely be a change of pace for Will Levis and that organization because he doesn't have the power that King Henry does. He's not going to absolutely truck people the way Derrick Henry does, but he's not weak either. He can still break tackles. He's got more speed, more burst, more acceleration, I think, than Derrick Henry had at this point in his career. So it'll be a change for the Titans, but I think it'll be a good one. I think he'll be a productive playmaker. And then I am so jealous of Lloyd Cushenberry going to the Titans. The Cowboys don't have a starting center on their roster right now. I know people are saying it might be Brock Hoffman, but no, it's not Brock Hoffman. Um, Cushionberry is amazing. He had a great season last year, career year. He really is going to solidify that position. He's only 26. He'll be there for a long time playing at a high level. I really hope the Cowboys would get him to replace Tyler Biadasz going to the Commanders. But sadly, it did not happen for us. But I'm happy it happened for you guys. Great player that you got there. Definitely deserve to be at number 2. At number 3, we have. Oh, well, actually, you said you needed to address the whole Calvin Ridley
Oh,
conversation.
I was just gonna say, one, Calvin Ridley said that he may be 29, but he's more like 25. So he said that in his interview. So we aren't getting a 29-year-old, we're getting a 25-year-old. So I just wanted to clear the air. It doesn't matter when he was born. We still have a young player. And the whole thing with AJ Brown, I've seen a bunch of that stuff too going around, and it's funny because like people are saying like, oh well, you weren't willing to pay AJ Brown this amount of money, but you're willing to pay Calvin Ridley this amount of money, and then people were trying to do side by sides. But it's like, okay, great, that's a great comparison. But what you're not talking about is we had a terrible GM who decided that with AJ Brown and decided to trade him away, and now we have a good GM. Two different situations, and Rand Carthon is trying his best as anybody in the Titans organization to rewrite that wrong. Because as soon as AJ Brown left, everyone knew it was a mistake. Everybody knew it was bad. And especially when Traylon Burks didn't shape out his first number of years. So the Titans have been looking for a guy to replace AJ Brown. And yes, side by side, maybe AJ Brown would have been better to retain younger wise. But hey, some of the controversy in the locker room with the Eagles seems to be a little bit of AJ Brown's fault. So we definitely don't want that in Tennessee. So maybe it was good that we offloaded him when we did. But still, yes, I know it seems ironic that we wouldn't pay AJ Brown that much, but we're paying Calvin Ridley that much. But this is a new GM. In Rand we trust, and let Rand cook is the words that we are living by right now.
Well, I really hope that whole thing works out for you, Carson. The whole Calvin Ridley quote you just talked about really reminded me of the Toby Keith song, "Don't Let the Old Man In." How old would you be if you didn't know the
Yes,
day you were born? I guess Calvin Ridley's 25 if he didn't know
he's
the day.
25. He said it. He spoke it into existence. So he's reverted back to his younger self.
See, well, again, for the Titans' sake, I really hope he, plays that way. Doesn't gamble anymore and get suspended again. Think about that one.
Yes. Really hoping he's learned. He said he has. We'll see if he yeah. Really keeping my fingers crossed.
Okay, so
Back on
moving
track.
back,
Yeah.
number 3, number 3 on our list, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Carson, how do you feel about that?
I agree. I think Pittsburgh Steelers are certainly a team that, as we will probably mention for the fourth team on our list too, which we'll get into soon enough. But I think the Pittsburgh Steelers really needed a quarterback. I don't think Kenny Pickett was shaping up to be what Pittsburgh wanted him to be. And I think going out and pretty much getting Russell Wilson for free was probably one of the best moves they could. Of course, I think at that time they were hoping that he'd come in and maybe he wouldn't be the starting quarterback, but he would be a mentor to Kenny Pickett. But of course, as things played out, Kenny Pickett's gone, and now they have Justin Fields. And I think out of those two quarterbacks with Russell Wilson or Kenny Pickett, not Kenny Pickett, I'm sorry, Justin Fields, those two guys, you put them in this kind of format in how the Pittsburgh Steelers are built, and really the question mark came at quarterback. So having that quarterback now that has the efficiency as whether it's Russell Wilson, whether it's Justin Fields, whatever that might be, I think that's great pickups. But especially on the defensive side of the ball, I think signing their divisional rivals, Patrick Queen from the Ravens, was also such a big boost to their. It's going to be disastrous defense in terms of having teams play against it. Because not only do you have TJ Watt on the line getting at your quarterback, but now you have Patrick Queen in that kind of secondary behind the line ish. And it's going to be a grinder for teams to get by both of those guys. Big playmakers, keeping especially in the Steelers kind of, I guess, format of how they play. Tough defense, but now they have their offensive problems. Should at least have them figured out with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields coming in to kind of help bolster that room. I think both of them are better than Kenny Pickett. So I think that there's only going to be success along those lines. So absolutely, I think the Steelers deserve this spot at number 3. I think they went out, they got some really key players. Of course, it's not a perfect team. Still, maybe some holes that they try to address in the draft. But still, that keeping to the Steelers' way of football, they went out and they got the guys they needed, especially as the situation evolved. Because I don't think anyone saw Kenny Pickett, blowing a gasket and wanting to leave and requesting a trade. So I think that certainly surprised the Steelers as well. So, but absolutely, I think the Steelers deserve number 3.
Yeah, I completely agree. They kind of remind me of the whole Viking situation where I feel like they had a really good roster. They just needed that quarterback to make it work. And they went from having, Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph as their 2 guys to having Russell Wilson and Justin Fields in the span of like a week, all for the cost of like a 6th round pick and $1 million. That's a huge upgrade. Justin Fields, in my opinion, has way more potential than either Kenny Pickett or Mason Rudolph. And obviously, Russell Wilson, proved that he's not the guy that he was in Seattle, but he's still a good quarterback. He's still, I think he was top 3 in the league in touchdown to interception ratio last year. He has much better talent around him in Pittsburgh than he would have had in Denver. He's got to be throwing the ball to Pickens and Fryermuth and Darnell Washington. Um, 3 really exciting young players. Now, the Steelers did trade away Deontay Johnson, so they really need a wide receiver too to step up. Maybe they'll address that in the draft. I imagine they will. But they have a great offensive line. They have a wide receiver number 1. They have great running backs. They have great tight ends. As you mentioned, they have T.J. Watt and a really loaded defensive line. They got Queen at linebacker. At corner, they have Joey Porter Jr. At safety, they got Minka Fitzpatrick. That's a really good roster. That's a really good team. They have a great head coach in Mike Tomlin. 2 exciting quarterback prospects, one for the future, one for the present. The Steelers absolutely have changed their fate by upgrading that quarterback position. And I would not be surprised to see them make a serious playoff run this year.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, they can clearly compete with any of those teams in the division. Maybe, yeah, it's always tough because whenever the Steelers play the Ravens, one of those games, both teams don't look like they're supposed to look, and it just becomes a bloodbath. So I don't know. But I especially with the Bengals and the Browns, I think the Steelers team could even be better than both of them. And it's going to be super interesting to see how this the AFC North shapes up.
Yeah, absolutely. It is going to be a lot of fun. But I think the 4th team on our list is right up there with Pittsburgh. They're from the NFC North. I'm talking about the Minnesota Vikings. I know that might come as kind of like a shock to a lot of people since they lost Kirk Cousins, and that was their quarterback 1. They wanted to retain him, and they didn't, and now they have a huge hole at quarterback. But like we were talking about before, I think they kind of built a really good team that just only had a hole at quarterback. They got 2 really good edge rushers this year. I know they lost Danielle Hunter, but they got 2 guys that were younger than Danielle Hunter, on long-term deals there. They got Van Ginkel and they got Jonathan Greener from the Texans, both really good edge rushers. So now they have a really scary duo on the defensive line that'll be there for at least the next few years. They got what's his name, Cashman at middle linebacker to pair with Ivan Pace Jr. So they got a great duo there. They just built a really great roster. And not only did they do that, but they recognized they had a hole at quarterback and they went and they did something about it. They traded for that second first-round pick. So now they have the draft capital necessary to move up and get their quarterback in the future, probably with the 3rd overall pick. A guy like Drake May or Jaden Daniels. When you have your team going from, again, being like middle of the pack team last year, not really, having any sort of playoff aspirations, to being in a position to have one of the better rosters in the entire league in one offseason, even if it's just by signing a couple edge rushers and linebackers and then letting your starting quarterback walk so you can trade up and get a new guy, a younger guy. To me, that is a fantastic way of running your team. I think the Vikings, like we talked about earlier, are going to be very competitive this year. And I think if they didn't have the free agency that they did, they wouldn't be competitive at all next year. So I was very happy to see them make the moves that they did. And I think they deserve to be at number 4.
Yeah. No, I mean those are all fair points. And absolutely, if you look at it in the sense of like, the moves that this team made has set them up for a better future than some of these other teams. And so yep, Vikings at 4, Vikings at 4. At number 5, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, the Eagles, as it may be a pain to Rob to admit, but they had also another fantastic free agency week, signing people, Bryce Huff, and other great defensive players, to really start to bolster this Eagles defense that struggled in the later half of the season last year. But I think the biggest name that they acquired was Saquon Barkley. And I know that Saquon Barkley is going to be a huge upgrade at running back for them, as last year they had DeAndre Swift. And I know that there was some limitations with Swift. Bringing Barkley in, I think, is going to change a lot of those things, and really make them a competitive team. I think, as I mentioned earlier, that this Eagles team, I think, really set out in free agency to start proving people wrong and what they were saying about, like, oh my goodness, this team fell apart. Like, how can you go 10-1 and just lose the rest of your games? Um, I think that the Eagles really wanted to go out and show people that, what, despite our setbacks, we're going to go out and we're going to even build a stronger team. And we're going to come right back at you and we're going to start, the whole process back to, we're going to be that guy. We're going to be that team. We're going to go to the playoffs. We're going to try to make that Super Bowl run. And adding some of these top players, especially Saquon Barkley on the offense, I think clearly solidifies them to be the number 5 team.
Yeah, the reason I think I have the Eagles at number 5, I don't necessarily agree with all the players they got. Like I think Saquon Barkley might not be as great as people think he is. I think he might have been regressing a little bit at the end of the Giants year last year. I don't think Devin White's that good. I'm pretty sure he got benched for some like rookie last year in Tampa Bay. But the reason I think they deserve to be at number 5 is because of the philosophy they had throughout free agency. They had weaknesses and holes in their team that they needed to fill, and they went out and got some of the best players available at those positions. That's a really aggressive way of doing things. That's a really good way of doing things. Most NFL teams don't operate like that. As much as it pains me to say this, it's like I'm swallowing acid right now. But that is probably the best way you could go about, free agency is going out and getting guys who fill those holes, that were very blatantly obvious on your team last season. The best guys available to do it. It's a way. Oh man, God, this sucks. It's an approach I admire. Okay, I think it's something that sets the Eagles apart from every other team in terms of how aggressive they are in trying to fill the needs they have on their roster. Like you said, they had a needed running back, so they got the best running back available, Saquon Barkley. They had a needed safety, so they got arguably, I'd say Xavier McKinney was a little better, but they got one of the best safeties available, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. They had a needed edge rusher, so they got the guy with one of the highest pass rush win rates over the past 3 years, of Bryce Huff. It's just they had a hole on their roster. They went out and got one of the top guys available to fill it. I think every team wishes they could do that, but they don't. They can't, and they don't for some reason that is unavailable to me. The Eagles. God, this is bad. But the Eagles were fantastic at addressing their holes, even if, like I said, I don't necessarily agree with all of the guys they got. Because, like I said, Saquon and Devin White, I'm not exactly very high on the two of them, but maybe they'll prove me wrong this season. Although I really hope they don't.
Yeah. Well, I think in addition to that is our top 5 in terms of teams that we think have the best free agency. I know that certain teams that didn't necessarily make our top 5 that I think deserve honorable mentions is the Green Bay Packers with Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney. Those 2 signings certainly helped a lot of holes on their roster as well. As is, it pains me to say this, but as well as the Houston Texans, they really made and built a scary defense Aziz Al-Shair, adding him, Darnell Hunter or Danielle Hunter from the Vikings, and also taking Danico Autry from the Titans. That defensive line and linebackers, and oh my goodness, they've built themselves a killer defense. So those are my two honorable mentions to this list as well. Rob, do you have any other honorable mentions?
No, I think you really hit the nail on the head there, especially the Texans. I think it was a tough choice between them and the Eagles for number five, but yeah, they had a really great offseason. So free agency period.
Well, shifting to the other side, we're now going to give you our Redzone Rodeo top 5 worst free agency times for these teams that we're going to be discussing. And at number 1, Rob, who do we have?
We have the Dallas Cowboys, and it's no surprise because they let their starting left tackle, all pro left tackle, Tyrone Smith, walk to the New York Jets. They let their starting center, Tyler Biadasz, walk to the Commanders. They let their starting running back, Tony Pollard, walk to the Tennessee Titans. They let two of their important rotational edge defenders, Dante Fowler and Durance Armstrong, leave for the Commanders. Um, they lost Leighton Vander Esch and Michael Gallup because they had to release them. They weren't really the same guys after injury. Leighton Vander Esch retired today from the league because he had a neck injury. Uh, and what did they do to replace all of those players that they lost? They signed one guy, one linebacker, Eric Kendricks, the 32-year-old linebacker from the Chargers last year. He was with Mike Zimmer to start his career, so I can understand why he came to Dallas. I think he'll be serviceable. I mean, he's a very instinctive and intellectual linebacker. It seems like he's always in the right spot, but he's just not as fast or strong as he used to be when he was a younger guy. I think he'll be fine. He'll be average, but he's not going to transform this defense and make it significantly better than it was last year. I think he'll pretty well fill the role that Leighton Vander Esch did. He does different things better than LVE, but he also does certain things worse than LVE. The concern the Cowboys have now is they have two holes on their offensive line they need to fill. They have a hole at running back they need to fill. They need to get some more linebackers. They haven't re-signed Stephon Gilmore yet, so they have a hole at corner. Although they did bring back Jordan Lewis, so that helps. They just have so many positions they need to fill. They need to get a wide receiver 3. There's so many positions, and they're going to have to do it all for the draft. They only have 6 picks in this draft. We have more positions to fill than we do draft picks. Jerry, what are you doing? You said you were going all in, and you signed absolutely nobody except for Eric Kendricks, who, again, smart signing, but we needed more than just Eric Kendricks. They absolutely deserve to be at the number 1 spot on this list because they lost a lot of talent, and they didn't do anything to, fix that. They did not fill any of the holes they had. They just created holes by letting players walk. So not only did they not get better from that horrifying loss to Green Bay in the playoffs last year, they got significantly worse, in my opinion. And it's going to be really difficult for them to recover from that in the draft.
Yeah. No, I at least you guys got your long snapper. That's also a
You're
good
right.
pickup.
The
Yeah,
season
that was
saved.
so special teams. There you go. There you go.
All in. All in. We re-signed our long snapper.
Exactly. That's how
That's
you know
all in right there.
that is exactly. Yep. Right there. Right there. Next up on our list, we have at number 2 the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the reason we have the Seahawks at number 2, it not as bad as the Cowboys, I feel, but they were very quiet when it came to free agency. They re-signed their defensive lineman Leonard Williams, which that was good, but this Seattle team just really seemed to struggle last year, um, particularly, on both. I mean, it was really both sides of the ball. They were kind of mediocre on both sides of the ball. There were games that they really showed up, and for example, that Eagles game when they played against the Eagles, but it just really seems like they didn't really do anything to keep up with the rest of their division. And as you were mentioning even about the Eagles, teams that have successful free agency are teams that notice their holes, notice the places they need to fill, figure out how they can get better, and then going out and getting those players to fill the hole. If you're standing idly by and watching as all of these, free agents are picked up, obviously there's still some more that can happen, but a lot of the bigger names are gone. What were you doing? Were you just sitting on the sidelines, sipping on a juice box and just watching like, oh, that's neat. Calvin Ridley went to the Titans. Oh, that's neat. Derrick Henry went to the, Ravens. Like, Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs going to the Packers. Great. And I think what should be even more concerning if you're a Seahawks fan is Geno Smith. Geno Smith did not play as well this past year. And there's definitely some questions at quarterback, and they, of course, they got Sam Howell from Washington, which is he's okay, I guess. But if you're a Seahawks fan, I think the questions that you're going to have is, okay, how is this roster, which is pretty much like the same from last year with some people that left, how is this roster going to be able to compete with the likes of the 49ers and the Rams? Especially when, we're talking about a conference as a whole where you're probably not going to get that a wild card spot, you know? And I think that the Seahawks, they certainly had some money to spend, and Pete Carroll is now gone. And it just seems this team just sat idly by. And, they did some stuff, but I don't know. I just don't think that any of their signings that they did, as we've mentioned with the teams that went out and they got players, whether they needed them or not. Like, I mean, you get the Texans, they absolutely rewrote their defense. And their defense was already okay. But I don't know. I think the Seahawks are at number 2 because of the fact that they just sat on the sidelines and watched it all go down, and they didn't make any attempts, according to my knowledge, to go out and get a person that can change their team to make it competitive with their top teams in the division.
The Seahawks, they're kind of tricky for me because they are really good at defensive line. They're really good at linebacker. They're really good at corner, but they're really good at wide receiver. And they're solid at tight end because they got Fant there. So you think
Mm-hmm.
about that, wow, they really don't have any needs. But then they don't have anyone at safety because they let their 2 starting safeties walk.
Mm-hmm.
Geno Smith is not the quarterback of the future. I think you know that after this past season. And their offensive line is just entirely in shambles. If they
Yep.
want to be competitive next year, you cannot address all those problems through one draft. It's a very similar situation to the Cowboys, where you're not going to be able to get your quarterback, your offensive line, and your safeties all in one go. You needed to do something in free agency to have a chance competing with, the 2 really tough teams in your division, the Rams and the Niners. And you did not do it. You got Sam Howell. That was your big plan this free agency.
Yeah.
Things could have gone a lot better. And as much as I do love parts of the Seahawks roster, until they have that offensive line and they have that quarterback spot figured out, and they don't do anything to address it, I mean, it's just going to continue to be a total failure for them. So,
Yeah. Next up on our list, we have at the number 3 spot, we have the Miami Dolphins. Now, Rob, why are the Miami Dolphins at number 3 when it comes to teams having the worst free agency?
yeah, well, they just lost a ton of talent. We mentioned Andrew Van Ginkel with the Vikings before, brilliant edge rusher that they lost. Christian Wilkins, we talked about him, just an absolute beast on the interior. He went to the Raiders. We talked about Jerome Baker, who was a fantastic linebacker last year for the Dolphins. He went to the Seahawks, we were just talking about. They lost Xavier Howard. It was probably time for him to leave because he wasn't the guy he once was. But that's still a loss that they had. Their defensive side of the ball just is basically obliterated. They signed a lot of free agents. A lot of them are like okay players, average guys, but they didn't sign any true difference makers like the ones they lost. And so because of that, I think their defense is going to take a huge step back next year. And because they didn't do anything to prevent that from happening, that's why I think they deserve to be on this list. They could have made a much better effort, in my opinion, to retain Christian Wilkins. When you have a blue chip player like that, someone who's just like the engine of your defense, you shouldn't let them walk. I mean, I know he's
Yeah.
28, so he's getting a little up there in age, but defensive linemen are usually pretty great up until they're like mid 30s. So they made a big mistake, I think, especially in letting Wilkins walk. But they should have at least retained one of Van Ginkel or Wilkins. Losing both of them like that, I know they have Chubb and they have Phillips, so they probably couldn't afford to pay Andrew Van Ginkel. But letting Christian Wilkins leave specifically is just a devastatingly bad move for the Dolphins.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. No, it's going to be a different Dolphins defense team, and a different division too at that. But moving on to number 4, we have the Los Angeles Chargers. And Rob, I know that you talked about the potential for them to maybe unseat the Chiefs as the division winner this upcoming year. But we're not talking about that. We're not talking about the draft. We're talking about strictly free agency. And the Chargers, unfortunately, did not have enough money to pay everybody. On their roster, I think the highest paid defensive players in the league. I think the Chargers had top in the top like 5. I think they had the top 3 or 3 out of the 5. Especially with Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa. I forget who the third was on the list, but very expensive contracts. And unfortunately, with that being the case, they had to make some decisions. And due to those decisions that they made to keep some of these bigger name defensive players, their defense seems to be cooking right along this upcoming season like it had, maybe with some additional additions, whatnot. But the offense really suffered. 2 top wide receivers are not on your roster anymore, especially veteran wide receivers at that. And, you could argue that Austin Eckler was maybe not the best running back, but he also is not in your building. And to fix some of those problems, they signed Gus Edwards from, I'm pretty sure, the Ravens, who has not been a stellar running back. Uh, so you replaced Austin Eckler with kind of mediocrity. You did sign Hayden Hurst at the tight end position, but Hayden Hurst, after Cincy, has not really been a top tight end. I know he went to Carolina for the last season, didn't really do much there. I know that's a struggling situation there. We'll see how that all plays out. But like some of these other teams on our list, they have a lot of holes. And I get that they had to sacrifice that in order to keep some of their star players on defense. Um, but to me, I think with a new kind of winning head coach coming in, with a player like Justin Herbert on your team, you kind of have to try to build around some sort of offensive weapon to get this team going. And I get that, yeah, you can maybe pick up someone in the draft, but this was not a stellar free agency time period for the Chargers. They lost more than they gained. And unfortunately, I don't think they have enough draft picks to fill all the holes. And so there is going to still be holes going into this season for this team. So we'll obviously see how that all plays out as well. But for the time being, the Chargers are at number 4 for us.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. I still think they're going to be a good team next year, but their free agency period was terrible. They didn't have the money to retain everyone. I think in terms of non-quarterback cap hits this year, they had the 4 highest with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Khalil Mack, and Joey Bosa.
Mhm.
So they couldn't keep all 4 of those guys because they were just over the cap. They had to get under, and restructuring with Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa allowed them to keep those 2 guys, but they had to move on from those 2 wide receivers. So yeah, they clearly lost a lot of talent. They didn't really bring anyone in. Um, Definitely not a good offseason for the Chargers.
All right. And at number 5, we have the Washington Commanders. And the thing I will say about the Commanders before I let Rob take things away is the Commanders had, if I'm not mistaken, the most amount of money to spend in this free agency. And I think the Commanders being on this list might surprise some of you guys, because they made a lot of signings. They went out and they got a lot of guys. But I think the guys they ended up getting are not going to be difference makers moving forward. There were certainly better players out there in free agency that they had the money and the capabilities to go out and get, and yet they didn't. So, Rob, why do we have the Commanders at number 5?
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. They got a lot of players. They spent the most money. They spent a historic amount of money in free agency this year. I think they got 15 new players on their team. Um, just most of them aren't very good. They made some big splash additions at linebacker, adding Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu. Those were the two best players they signed by far, which is really saying something because Wagner is in his 30s and Louvu, I think, is getting up there in age. So having two aging linebackers be your best signings when you've made so many is really an indictment on your signing process. At running back, they added Austin Eckler, also, approaching his 30s, was not good last year, was actually one of the worst running backs in the league last year, according to PFF score. He was the 55th out of 59 linebackers. They added Marcus Mariota, who I guess is a fine backup quarterback, which is, I guess, their plan for him. But when you're making big free agency moves with all that money, is backup quarterback really the position you want to address? They went and they got Tyler Biadasz from the Cowboys. I love Biadasz as a guy, but he was a huge reason our running game was so bad last year. He gets zero push up the middle. He's just not strong enough. He's a great guy. I love him as a person, but as a center, we needed to move on, and that's probably a big reason we let him walk. From the Cowboys, they also got Dante Fowler and Durance Armstrong. Armstrong was like I think close to 10 sacks last year and the year before. Fowler was a presence on the edge for the Atlanta Falcons before, eventually ending up with the Cowboys. They both have their moments, they'll flash, but they're not going to bring consistent pressure the way you would want your starting edge rushers to. There's a reason they were backup rotational pieces for the Cowboys and not starters. Um, and unfortunately for the Commanders, those are the best edge rushers on their team right now is Dante Fowler and Durance Armstrong. The thing with those two guys, a lot of their stats from the previous years really came from other guys. Like Micah Parsons would chase a quarterback out of the pocket, and then Durance Armstrong would wrap him up. They did not really create that sort of havoc on their own. Every once in a while, like I said, you'd see a splash from them, but these are not going to be your edge rushers of the future. And you still really need to upgrade at that position. Yeah, you brought in a lot of guys. Yeah, you spent a lot of money, but you didn't really accomplish all that much. There were other guys. I think it would have served them better to get some big name free agents, have like maybe 5 big name guys instead of 15, middle of the pack to not so good guys. But that's the approach they took. So they spend a lot of money and they don't really have all that much to show for it.
Yeah, it's truly, concerning, I think, for a fan base, where there's a lot of hype with you have the second overall pick, you have all this money to spend, and you go out and you do that. And I think really like the way to kind of like do like a little bit of a side by side is the Titans almost they had less, but they almost were in the same situation. Maybe not quarterback wise, but you see the differences in those teams. The Tennessee Titans went out and just like some of those teams that we stated on our best free agency, they went out and they filled the holes with top tier people. They went out and they were like, you know what, we need to sign the best to fill these holes. Whereas the Commanders, it seemed like they were just like, well, we'll take anybody we can get. Maybe it's a rotational guy that'll fill a hole. Which I mean, at the end of the day, yeah, you're filling holes, but are you really filling holes? Are you just making bigger holes by putting in these rotational pieces that, oh yeah, they did well, like you mentioned, like Micah Parsons allowing those edge rushers to get sacks. Were they really on their own doing those, or were they relying on other players? So absolutely, I think the Commanders really swung and missed on free agency. Not as bad as some of the other teams on this list, but they definitely deserve the number 5 spot in our Redzone Rodeo rankings. So, yeah. Do we have, Rob, any honorable mentions? I guess unhonorable mentions for this part of the worst free agency teams?
maybe the Carolina Panthers, just because. Well, you
Yeah,
know what? We'll talk about that in the Red Zone Rodeo Clowns of the Week segment, which we are gonna start right now, I guess.
of
Uh,
course. Here we go. Let's launch in.
yeah. So again, going back to the Carolina Panthers, I think them trading Brian Burns to the Giants for only a second and like a fourth or a fifth, I think it was absolutely atrocious. One of the dumbest things they could have done. They had a deal on the table for him last year for 2 first-round picks, and they decided to keep him for 1 year for what? To go, 2-15 and give the Bears the first overall pick. That was your plan? If you
Yeah.
weren't going to retain him, why did you keep him? You were not going to get a better offer than 2 first-round picks. If the plan was not to retain him, why did you not trade him? Did you think his value was going to go up with one less year available on his deal? No. That is
No.
the dumbest move they could have made. I mean, it made me sick to my stomach because it was like such an easy and big win for one of our, divisional rivals, the New York Giants, to just flip a second for, a great pass rusher and Brian Burns.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sick for Carolina Panthers fans, and I'm sick for the fact that this guy is now in my division that's going to be rushing, our non-existent left tackle in the foreseeable future. So it definitely has me nervous. I did not like that move, but the Carolina Panthers are Red Zone Rodeo Clowns of the Week for making that trade in the first place.
Absolutely. No, I can't agree more. It's really just unspeakable. I really just don't know what to say about it. It's so bad that it's just not even. You wouldn't think that this we would be talking about this today. You would not think that this would be on our rodeo clowns of the week. But here it is. And I really don't know what the Panthers organization as a whole is doing. Of course, they absolutely swung and missed with Bryce Young. Could be some hope that he, does a little bit better. But this team is going to be cursed for a number of seasons with this. And I get maybe they're just trying to get draft picks to help fix their situation. But why are you trying to get rid of this guy, this generational talent guy that would be a cornerstone piece to build your defense around? It's beyond me. It's beyond me. Another Red Zone Rodeo Clown of the Week goes out. This is back-to-back weeks, so this is big. Aaron Rodgers gets another one for our Red Zone Rodeo Clowns of the Week. There has been, as some of you may have known, this talk that Aaron Rodgers could be vice president to the independent candidate. And not only was that just a rumor, but he openly accepted that rumor and openly accepted that as a possibility. Now, as for Jets fans, I'm sure everyone was going crazy because they're like, oh my goodness, Aaron Rodgers is not going to be our quarterback. He's going to go run for office. Who's going to be our quarterback? Zach Wilson? What? And I'm sure Jets fans were sick to their stomach upon hearing this whole thing. And obviously, I don't think that Aaron Rodgers would be going to do this. But oh my goodness, even just to consider the notion of it, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, you're supposed to be the quarterback for the Jets. If you wanted to go pursue office, don't you think you would have had that conversation with the Jets organization or the players, the staff, the people, would instead of just, being like, oh yeah, there's talk that you could be the vice president, and be like, yeah, I could see myself doing that. What are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Like, you're basically telling your fans that honestly, I could care less about football. I might want to pursue politics. How does that as a fan base make you feel about your starting quarterback that you were so happy to get last year, bringing someone in that was going to be hopefully going to change all of the whatnot that was going on, and then unfortunately snaps his Achilles in the first game, finally could get him back this season, and now he's going to be running for vice presidency. You know what? Aaron Rodgers, you are a fool, and you are our second week in a row Red Zone Rodeo Clown of the Week. Just don't do it, man. Play football. That's what you're good at. Don't do politics.
Yeah, you said that perfectly, Carson. I mean, dude, come on. What are you doing, man? You were the one who came out like just a couple of weeks ago and you're like, whatever's outside of this building, that's noise. We don't want that in here. We
Yes.
want to focus on what's inside our building. And then you go and do this. Come on, man. What are you doing? You're creating this huge offseason distraction for your team, creating unnecessary drama. Why? Why would you do this to your team? You know what? Here's a theory I have, Carson. I don't think he was ever actually going to run for vice president. I think him and RFK Jr. talked about this and they're like, you know what? Let's just leak this to the media and draw this storyline out for about a week, and then we'll kill it because that's going to get a lot of people talking about both of us. That's going to build up national attention for both of us. It's good for RFK Jr. because he gets in the headlines, which he hasn't really been doing lately because he's an independent party candidate. You know, usually irrelevant in American elections. And it's good
Yeah.
for Aaron Rodgers because he loves to be the center of attention. He's an egomaniac who loves it when people talk about him. And I bet you that the whole time he knew he wasn't running for vice president. RFK Jr. knew he wasn't running for vice president. But like, you know what? We're friends. Let's go create this little, news maelstrom for a week and have everyone's eyes on the two of us. That is, you know what? I would be willing to bet money that's what happened.
I'm
Because
sure. I'm sure.
Aaron, you just make me sick, dude. You are absolutely a Redzone Rodeo clown of the week. Ugh. Okay.
Let's see if he can come back and make a third Redzone Rodeo Clown of the Week. That would be the first ever three-peat.
Yeah, he will absolutely find a way to get back on this list. Of that, I am sure. There's no one in the NFL better at getting on this list than Aaron Rodgers, except, maybe this next guy on our list who also is making me sick to my stomach. And that's Jerry Jones, who was also on the list last week, saying, oh, yeah, the Cowboys are all in. This is going to be different. We're going to go out and, actually do something for once and, try and make our team better. Jerry, oh my goodness, man. Okay, I would have been fine if you just stuck with the standard you created last year, where you retained your important players and maybe traded for like older vet with some like late round draft picks. You did so much worse than that. You didn't retain a single one of our important players. You let all of them walk in free agency. And then you didn't sign anyone to refill all the holes they left on our roster. How on earth is this your definition of all in? I know you think your definition of all in is having everyone coach on a 1 year contract, have Dak play on a 1 year contract. That's all in because we're only focusing on this year. That is literally nobody else's definition of all in. When literally everyone else, every other living human being in the world hears that phrase all in, they think that means you're pushing all the chips in the center of the table this year. You're going to take that extra cap space that you could have used next year and use it to acquire talent for this year. You're going to go all in by pushing all of your assets into the center of the table to make a run this year. That's what everybody thought. And you let us down in the worst possible way. This has been the worst offseason we've had ever since I've become a Cowboys fan. It was terrible. Jerry Jones, you and your all in comment are once again Redzone Rodeo clowns of the week. God.
Maybe Jerry Jones will be the three-peat Redzone Rodeo Clown.
He just
Next
might.
week it might kill you.
It might. It really might.
Another one to address is we kind of mentioned it a little bit, but the Chargers wide receiver room. Oh my goodness. You have a generational talent quarterback, as I've mentioned, in Justin Herbert. We saw the struggles last year. And you take the top two guys who have done the handful of the catches, the receiving yards, keeping your team relevant, and you let them go. You let them go in favor of huge, expensive defensive players, which I understand are vital to a good defense. But you could have let one of them walk. Maybe Khalil Mack, who did he do really well last year? He did decent. He was okay. You could have let him go, and you could have retained probably both of your wide receivers. Keenan Allen wanted to stay in Los Angeles. He didn't really want to go to the Bears. I don't know if you saw that kind of like press conference speech, but he was like, I wanted to retire a Charger, but things happened, and now he's on the Bears. So and I don't blame this on Jim Harbaugh because he just walked into the situation, but the general management of the team. How do you think you're going to win without wide receivers? Yeah, let's get rid of your guys. You're both your guys. And let's just rely on Quentin Johnston, the guy who dropped every pass last year, pretty much. I get that you're going to probably be drafting a high draft pick in Malik Neighbors. Maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. will be there if the Cardinals don't go him. I don't know. But that's great. You're bringing in a rookie and you're putting all your hopes on a rookie. That guarantee could absolutely go out and blow the league away. Absolutely. Could be possible. But that's one guy. And now you're supposed to tell Justin Herbert, yeah, you're good. That's all you need. You get a guy that drops balls and you get a new rookie in that building. Nobody else, really. That's fine. Oh, wonderful. You know what? That is a terrible plan for success. And how do you win in the NFL? It's not the running game anymore. And God forbid they don't have a running game with Gus Edwards or whatever his name is. Guy Edwards. I forget what his name is. But Gus.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's not how you're going to win. You need to throw the ball. Who are you throwing it to? No one knows. No one knows. So, Chargers, the front office, whoever made this decision to keep both super expensive defensive players at the expense of your wide receiver room, you are a Redzone Rodeo clown of the week.
Yeah. What was bad, obviously, was letting them walk, the two wide receivers, or cutting them or trading them. But what was even worse was how you dealt with that. If you were going to get rid of both of them, you could have done that in a much better way. You could have traded Keenan Allen at the trade deadline this offseason or this past season when it was kind of clear that the Chargers weren't really going where they wanted to go. You probably would have gotten more for him than just a fourth round pick. You
Yeah.
could have done something with Mike Williams. You could have traded him instead of just letting him, leave for nothing when it was clear that the Chargers were not going in the direction they wanted to. Why did you hold on to them so long if you were just going to get rid of both of them at the end of the season? What was your plan there? What did you think was going to happen?
Yeah.
I know the Chargers wanted to somehow retain Mike Williams after they let him off, but that's not going to happen. I know they wanted to give Keenan Allen a pay cut, but that's not going to happen, especially not when he's having a career year. What kind
Yeah.
of management is that? Not only did you leave your quarterback without any viable weapons, but you let those weapons leave without getting anything in return for them of substantial value outside of a fourth round pick. Come on, man.
Yeah.
Chargers, Redzone Rodeo, clowns of the week for sure. And here's one that, I enjoy very much personally. I'm going to say all the hype around the Philadelphia Eagles deserves to be Redzone Rodeo Clown of the Week. And I know we said they had one of the 5 best free agencies. Okay. And that's true. That's true. No one's taking away from that. But Saquon Barkley, come on, that's an old washed running back, and you gave him $40 million. What are you doing? Everyone else in the league knows that that's a position you don't pay, and you went out and gave him one of the biggest contracts a running back has gotten in years. Why? What has he done that's made you think he's worth that besides his draft pedigree and the 1 year he was a rookie where he had some great highlights? What has he done since then besides get hurt and not be great? Nothing. And you gave him a $40 million contract. That's nuts. Devin White, the linebacker they signed, he got benched last year. That's the guy. That's the one that's going to be the answer for the bucket or for the Eagles at linebacker. That's really who you went with. Come on, man. Their roster was bad enough last year. Their team was falling apart last year. There was like a lot of locker room drama. And in order to address that situation, what you do is you go bring in Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, the guy who roasted the Philadelphia Eagles on Twitter after they let him go last year, the drama queen himself. What do you think is going to happen when you put him and A.J. Brown in the same locker room? Nothing good. The
No.
Eagles, they had a great free agency, okay, but it's not as great as people say it was. There's definitely some problems with it. And for that reason, I think all the hype around the Philadelphia Eagles deserves to be a Redzone Rodeo Clown of the Week.
Yeah, and on top of that, there's also these rumors that like OBJ is now going to be going to the Eagles because he wants to partner with Saquon Barkley. That would be awful. And Eagles fans are like, yeah, bring in Odell Beckham Jr., our savior. And it's like, what? You know what he's done to every single locker room with whatever team he's played for, it's controversy. So now you want to stick AJ Brown and Odell Beckham Jr. in the same locker room. You want both of those top, like, I'm the guy type attitudes to be in the locker room. You're going to tear your team apart worse than the team was last season. And Eagles fans are like, wouldn't it be great if we just drafted OBJ? No, it wouldn't. No, or not drafted, got him in the building. No, it wouldn't. No, you already have top talent at wide receiver. You don't need any more. Why are you throwing OBJ more money? He's just old and he's washed. He didn't really do anything on the Ravens last year. Not anything in the playoffs. And like, oh, okay, great. He had that one big catch with the Rams in the Super Bowl, and that was really good. No, don't give him money. He doesn't deserve it. And the whole notion of like, oh, wouldn't it be neat? Saquon and OBJ back together again. No, who cares about that? That's stupid. Yeah, Eagles fans, you are Red Zone Rodeo Clowns of the Week.
Mhm.
Another one that I just can't get my head around to is Kenny Pickett. Can we please talk about Kenny Pickett here? Because I literally don't understand there is no logical sense in my mind that makes me think that Kenny Pickett bettered his situation by requesting a trade. Absolutely not. I understand, Kenny, that you were the starting guy and you're working, you're trying to make things work, whatnot, and they bring in Russell Wilson. First of all, he's pretty much free. The Broncos are paying his entire contract. Any team should have gone after Russell Wilson if they needed any type of help at quarterback, whether that's a player or even just a veteran support to help your players grow around him. It's a no-brainer thing. But to have that signing happen and immediately after it happens, you don't even think of the idea of like, oh, this could maybe work. But instead, you throw away any chance you have at a starting role and you demand a trade. And then you not only demand a trade, but you also kind of are like, I would like to go to the Eagles. That's a great spot. What? Do you want to be a backup for the rest of your life? Do you want to sit on the bench and be like, go team? You want to get a Super Bowl that way? Oh, look at my ring. What did you do? Oh, I sat on the bench and was a backup. Cool. That's great. Loser. I don't know. Like that doesn't mean anything. You didn't play a single game. Oh, well, maybe he could be the Nick Foles of the Carson Wentz era. Okay, that could happen, but probably not because you're not really that good. So you literally left your entire Pittsburgh realm where the people, even though they may have, said that, oh, he may not be good enough, they were willing to give you another shot. And even with Russell Wilson coming in the building, there was no way that was the idea that, oh, Russell Wilson, he's starting and you're done. You're going to be on the bench for the rest of your career. They signed Russell Wilson to a 1-year deal. You could have been right back in the middle of the ship the next year, or even that year if Russell Wilson didn't play well. Did you see how he did in Denver? Not great. I don't understand this. I don't really get it. Kenny Pickett, you are a crybaby, and I don't understand what makes you think that going to the Eagles or any other team other than the Steelers was the best thing for your career. And for that reasoning, Kenny Pickett, you are a Red Zone Rodeo Clown of the Week.
I completely agree, man. Dude, I didn't know Kenny Pickett was a baby like that. I mean, first the reports came out last year about him like throwing a tantrum or whatever because he got benched for Mason Rudolph. Kenny, if you didn't want to get benched, maybe don't suck, dude. Maybe be
Yeah.
better than Mason Rudolph. It's that simple. Come on, dude. And then they signed Russell Wilson to a 1-year deal. Okay, obviously not going to be around long term. Even if he signs for another year, that's only 2 years. Okay, he doesn't have a lot of time in the league left. Kenny, you could have sat behind him, learned from him, and then taken over that spot once he left. You could have been the Patrick Mahomes to his Alex Smith. Instead, you had to go and throw a hissy fit because Russell Wilson was brought in as your competition. Come on. There wasn't even a guarantee he was going to be the starter this year. You were going to get a chance to compete with him.
Yeah.
And you still threw a hissy fit? Dude, what is wrong with you? That's embarrassing. That is embarrassing for you. God, it makes me sick to think about. You
It really
belong on
does.
the Eagles. That's where you belong. That's where you deserve to be. That's the type of team that deserves you. They are collecting. They just want every single cancerous player in the league in their locker room. Crybaby Kenny Pickett, AJ Brown, Chauncey Gardner Johnson. They're just like collecting these guys like infinity stones. Oh my God.
Saquon
No wonder.
Barkley. Yeah,
Saquon, yeah, Odell's gonna go there now. He's got to.
probably.
He complete the
They got to
trifecta.
gather them all.
Dude, Kenny Pickett, you are a Red Zone Rodeo Clown of the Week. Come on.
Why do you wear two gloves? I've never got him wearing two gloves. One's for your throwing hand. I get that. Why do you have the other one? There's no reason. Why are you wearing a second glove? Oh, I
He's
just
embarrassed
don't
about
get
business
it.
and quarterback situation that's going to end up here on our Red Zone Rodeo Clown of the Week list. Chicago Bears, what are you doing? Only a sixth round pick in exchange for Justin Fields. Man, he was one of the most promising young quarterbacks in the league. Last year, he really won over Bears fans. He really won over their locker room. People were talking about him being traded for a second or even a first round pick this offseason. The best you
Yeah.
could do was a
Yeah.
six? Come on. Come on. There had to have been a market for him before that. And you decided to wait and wait and wait and wait and see, what could you possibly get? What's the best deal? You thought it was just going to keep going up and up. You thought the market would keep getting better. No, it didn't. It got worse as teams started getting their quarterbacks, they didn't need Justin Fields anymore. And then his value went down and his price went down. You should have moved on from him earlier. Waiting that long and diluting his value all the way down to a conditional sixth round pick 2 years from now? Come on. You are Red Zone Rodeo Clowns of the Week.
It makes no sense. It literally makes no sense. If the Bears organization had any thought that they wanted to keep Justin Fields, it makes sense. And that means Justin Fields would still be on the roster because they still had hope. Even maybe, because there was that speculation that even if they do draft Caleb Williams in the draft, maybe Justin Fields is dealt later after the draft for teams that maybe didn't get their quarterback. That would have been smart. No, no. They clearly didn't want Justin Fields. You were right, Rob, about that they wanted to move on from him. So if you did, why did you just sit around and twiddle your thumbs and watch all the other quarterbacks go to places and then wonder, you know what? I don't think there's another starting role for this guy. So we're not going to get a lot of money for him. Not money or draft picks. What? Why are you waiting? Like, literally, there was that speculation that he would go to the Steelers from the get-go before Russell Wilson even went there. If that was an idea and you were in talks with the Steelers, as clearly it seemed like there was some sort of talking, because that's where he's at now, why didn't you just go out and be like, you know what? You can have him for a second or a third. Why drag it out? Why would you drag it out to the point where, oh, the Falcons, there they go. There's a quarterback for the this team and that team and this team. And oh, where is he going to go now? There's no starting spots. Teams are set to draft their quarterback. So Justin Fields, and are you doing right by Justin? No, you're not. At least what the Broncos did with Russell Wilson was at least kind to him. They were like, yeah, you're not our guy. But we're going to release you super early so that you can go maybe to a team that wants you. What are you doing, Bears? Why would you do that? Like, you literally have taken Justin Fields' career, and even if you didn't think he was that guy, you just crumple it up and you're like, I'm holding on to you, and then I'm throwing you in the trash because that's basically what happened. And granted, he finally landed at a spot with the Pittsburgh Steelers now that Kenny Pickett, threw a hissy fit and now is gone. But still, like, great, he can maybe battle for a starting role. But take the Steelers out of the equation. Where would he have gone? Where would he have gone? He wouldn't have gone anywhere. He would have maybe got a third or a second quarterback role. And is that good? Is that someone that you draft up really? You go up, you get the guy, you bring him in, you let him play for 3 seasons, three seasons, and then you're like, yep, you know what? I don't want to play with you anymore. You're not my favorite toy. Bye. Let's just throw you away for a sixth round pick 2 years from now. Great. So yeah, absolutely. Chicago Bears, what were you doing with Justin Fields? You are our Red Zone Rodeo Clown of the Week as well. Come on, man. Do better. But, well, we have certainly covered a lot, Rob, tonight. And whether it is Red Zone Rodeo Clowns of the Week, which drive me insane with some of the things that happened recently, or whether it is breaking down the best and the worst of the free agency in terms of team-wise, or maybe tackling which teams and which divisions are better set for the future. I certainly had a great time, basically kind of breaking down what happened these past weeks with in terms of all of these signings. We hope that you all did as well. Hopefully some of our takes aren't too crazy for you, but please let us know down in the comments section. Let us know what you think. Is there any teams on our lists that we forgot that you think should be higher up? Do you disagree with some of our takes? Let us know down below in the comment section. We love to hear from you guys. And honestly, these are just our opinions on it. They're not the gospel truth. So we are always open for discussion on any of these topics, and we love it. So, we like to provide that space for you all to come on in, and hopefully in the near future we'll be able to do some live shows. Maybe we'll take some callers or something like that, so we can get you guys involved in a more active way. But until then, we'll keep giving you great content every single week, and we want to thank every single one of you who have stuck around so far and continue to help grow the channel. And if you're not already a subscriber and want to know whenever we put out more videos and put out more content, please consider liking and subscribing these videos. It only helps us grow the channel, and we are truly grateful for any of y'all that have taken that step already, and for any of you who are considering taking that step. So thank you very much.
Yeah. One thing I will say, I would love to hear your guys' Redzone Rodeo Clowns of the Week. If you have any suggestions for that, you should definitely comment those. And, if there's any really good ones, maybe we'll add them to the list next week. I think that'd be pretty funny. But yeah, thank you again for watching with us and, just watching us talk about football. This is definitely becoming, one of my favorite, if not my favorite parts of the week, getting to sit here and record this with you, Carson, and just talk about football for a few hours and forget about everything else going on in the world right now. So,
Absolutely. The feelings are mutual.
Yeah. So I'm just really happy we can keep doing this, and we're going to keep doing it. So if you like it, then, subscribe and come along with us for it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you guys again. And we're going to close us out this episode. Keep out on the lookout for some of the clips from this when this gets up. And feel free to share it with your friends as well. If you like what we said and whatnot, any help in regards to that will be greatly appreciated. But anyway, guys, I hope you have a great week. We will catch you all next week and get ready to break down some more crazy news and some more crazy things in the football world. Get ready for the UFL. We're about 2 weeks out. So some great stuff upcoming. Next show, we'll be covering a lot more of the UFL as it's right around the corner. So we hope you guys are as stoked as we are. But until next week, when we get another episode out to you, we can't wait until that time. So hope you all have a great rest of your week. Enjoy it. And until next time, we're going to be signing off. See you guys.